down this little room, there's like a counseling. Yeah. Oh, I kind of just, yeah.
Telling my wife about the event yesterday. I was trying to remember exactly what you said you did. Was it emotional consulting? Yeah. Well, no, my wife used to work for a nonprofit, and she was doing a lot of education with people around workplace, resident building, all that kind of stuff. But she's kind of moved into more of the rural valley operation for it. But she wants to potentially go more, do more consulting program. That's an expensive one yesterday.
I've been out of my own since 13.
Don't worry about it. Didn't realize that must be fake.
What is her name?
Dawson.
Her name's Alana.
Are you're just gonna have to hold it?
Yeah, I don't mind. Unless you want to set like a side table up or something.
I think we totally could. And I'm gonna get this. Sort of saying use this to what serves. Yeah. Do you want to come into my car with me and try to find something?
Sure.
Happy to chat with her. Let's see if I'm motivated beyond the data.
Me too. That's my biggest question.
Yeah, I remember doing that first plant, which was down in like California. A long time ago. It went. It was actually good. It was like, it came up. It's funny too, because when I did that, I was in Marine here in California. I was working for a company. And here I was living like, I had a one-room shack, another room in the back of my, so I was out on my deck. So I was having a life of corporate, like the moment I had this other life.
Good.
Yeah, so it was nice. It was cool. I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
All these years. It is fun. I don't know what to do, so. I do consulting and training programs. It's on my own. A lot of counties in California. I've been in Oregon for years.
Yeah.
So,
What type of consulting?
kind of like all the soft skills and leadership.
Oh,
Yeah.
You said just before the 2 years?
3 years ago. Yes. Well, we were back in Boston, we were 17, we were originally from California. Another journey. We continue. We lived there. We were in the county. Our daughter was a few years old. We came across, when you have a kid, children. Yeah. It was like right away, we were talking to one of their, it's like, well, we talk about education. I wasn't that good in school, or high school, but my life was based on grades. We ended up discovering a school that was purpose and peace. We were back in Massachusetts. Very alternative. We tried to found a school like that, and we actually began the process. We could see that, our families were people that had a lot of families that was going to happen, so we relocated back east. Kids, they take you. Absolutely.
I'm gonna pass around a clipboard. Anyone that's not already on the email list that wants to be, feel free to sign up. I'm just gonna send it around.
Yeah, we just it'll work.
Now we can check it out from here.
That's what everyone says.
I mean, not at this, depending on how that.
Well, it's relative, right? Because in retrospect, it'll feel like it went by fast. Right now, it's
Right now,
it's intense.
It still feels like that was very too.
I've heard that. I've heard that it's like
doesn't it?
like 26 even. They're still kind of attached. They're just a
No, I don't
satellite
know what
that's
you mean by
further
that.
out. They're still in your orbit.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on, I guess, the person and the job and how the relationship is.
Who is she?
Our daughter just got married, so it's a whole new chapter for us.
That's exciting.
New and, so we're learning about immigration. They're here.
Yeah.
It's
They're what?
something.
Particular about that.
They were with so they just found out the place, which is great.
Anybody got this chair over here?
Nope, that's free.
I don't know, I didn't.
I mean, it was great to have them, but you know too much. You know too much.
At that age, they've had their independence,
Yeah.
and coming back, it's kind of challenging, must be challenging.
It worked. It worked. I mean,
Yeah.
we made it work.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's, because it's create your own space.
All the others started in college this year, so she's with them. It's been interesting of how much of the house dynamic changes when one's still there and one's
It was like, our daughter was like, we were like, my advice would be with the colleges. My view was like, let them apply to any school, but ultimately make the decision unless it doesn't matter. Unless they're totally into something. Obviously, look at all these kids. I mean, I was already ahead of it because I could see what was coming, trending.
The trend for my kids, I'm just thinking like.
Your children are actually in the new.
So there'd have to be, I think there might be some sort of either educational revolution that change, because it won't be.
Kind of already happened. One of the things that's happening is that a lot of people are going like, should I do college?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, working?
maybe not.
Yeah.
Since it's really,
Got a bit of a situation on our hands. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah. Or
and
if that's
it's
what you're looking at.
yeah.
Okay, so you got.
Workshops where someone doing words and just, yeah, you're talking. People don't know each other.
exactly.
That message.
Like,
Is the email list for the 2GS?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or else I can out say.
Is that different from the
But she just called me. She's good. Yeah.
Is that different from the meetup and the Facebook?
Different.
Any different information?
We really rarely use the email list except for very important notifications. For instance, the conference tickets. We maybe send out 3 or 4 emails a year. That's probably going to change this year, just with how much we're doing and how much is going on. But yeah, we definitely don't blow up people's emails. Okay, so it's 4:03. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes here. Just going to let everyone else come in.
This particular workshop. None of the other society events, I think it's preliminary. Yeah, when I saw it come up, I was like, yeah, sign up, but it should take off. Yeah. So later.
So do you have family around to help?
There's no way we would have maintained any level of sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that even they told us there's, if you don't have help, you need to move and go find it.
Get help.
Yeah, just with the situation. Yeah, one of them is a college, so it's an extra bonus. But we're in the. I know it's a little the comparative to a year ago. I feel like it's just so.
Yeah.
Did you see that movie?
Yeah.
I heard about it a couple weeks ago.
It's like, the thing is
I wasn't that impressed.
because they're changing.
It's interesting, you know.
Yeah,
It's like you're living in a world different.
you need to get used to the change.
It gets into a pattern of change.
Yeah,
It's like,
and that's what you have to get used to.
yeah, right.
Which is a good life skill.
It is. I mean,
Just constantly
it's
adapt.
good. Yeah,
It didn't go,
it's really hard. I think. And then people
sort of stopped.
Yeah,
Things were resolved.
yeah,
You know, whether everything's ever resolved.
right.
What did you think?
It was clearly just taking film of what was happening when they cut it together. It was like, didn't really have a hard habit. I know what the interaction was supposed to be,
Yeah.
but it didn't.
Me too.
It didn't count.
Yeah.
The documentary Troubleshooting didn't have that much experience. Certainly won't win awards.
Oh, I was watching both sector. We were. That was our lawyer putting together 30 years.
And they had ratings 5 stars.
Hanging on by
I
that thread.
mean, it was like, this is information, because there are other people, we were other beings.
Yeah.
I just wasn't. I'm an amateur. I was expecting.
Even, we brought her with us and did breastfeeding, and, we laughed in there around,
Yeah.
which,
That's intense. And it's
So
just
you want to master this
knowing that you've got it.
growing.
yeah, there's no harm. I mean,
I want to see what it's
Yeah.
about.
Up until all the other points in your life, you will eventually fail. But this is the one.
Oh, I'm definitely gonna give it a try. I've got a house full of people that go, do it, yes. Come on, growers.
first shot.
I don't know, we'll see.
you know, separate out their stories. But I always had my 6 person that was what I meant by one. 6, we weren't going to initially have to change our mind. In our case, it was like, we were all about to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot. I came to the last one. It was an awful lot too. So, yeah.
I feel grateful. I mean, I really just because, you know,
That's why I came early to get some of your things.
Totally. Yeah. And even hard times in retrospect.
Oh, I'm not ready to do it at all. Right now I'm in that state of about to move.
Went through the
So everything is in boxes. Happily Portland, unfortunately. Can't afford to live here. Temporary Colorado Springs. I'll be living with 5-bedroom house, but I should retire soon.
It's nice to have.
You have to have it. Like, you need those rests.
I say create them.
Yes.
I would say put them.
But you can't have all rest.
Not on board.
Oh yeah, like 40 years.
I mean, it might not be quote rest. It should be. There should be pause in between.
For everybody.
I totally agree.
But not in the mode. You know, you're having to find it in a
Oh,
different.
out here.
Well, it's cool to do stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even be. You know.
So actually, this is what I'm saving.
Renting a room with somebody.
Yeah, I've done that too, yeah.
And I'm starting to think hard about
It was starting to get kind of
how I
trendy and
could
hot, you know.
manage to stay, or whether I could stay.
Bouncing around.
Yeah, my retirement
Great, too,
income
'cause she's
just doesn't quite make it. I mean, I can cover all my costs,
Yeah.
but then I can't do anything else.
Had you
And that's not living.
Oh yeah, but I did them in my
I'll be living
20s,
where
and
I
then I
just have
kind of
to
stopped.
Yeah.
Or I did them in my teens, and I think I kind of stopped when I turned about.
Yeah.
Good air
A
conditioning.
lot. You know, I did see
So,
we didn't know what we were doing because you're so young, and it feels like you might not want because we're so young.
I have a person who does sits for people who want to do that.
Is it the same friend that you?
You know, and that's
Yeah, okay.
And she doesn't charge for it.
Yeah.
good. A cool project.
What are her initials?
Our
Name is
version of
Elizabeth.
our journey together.
Yeah.
That's not who I was thinking.
He's the only one I've ever.
Well, there's lots of people
I've
who
done a lot.
are important.
Training of
Oh,
background.
she's got a master's, bachelor's and master's in
And
clinical psychology and all that stuff.
That's
And
cool.
was she?
Yeah.
Did she see
I
clients?
decided.
Oh, yeah.
That was her business.
Yeah, oh, she does every day.
Still.
Oh, yeah.
So were you a therapist for a while? Or?
Well, I was initially, but I didn't get to pursue my license. I did a different path.
Yeah.
Jared, I got 10. I'm relocating. I read a book right after grad, right around the time I was getting my graduate degree. I was 70, so it's called psychology. Just directed things before university.
Space over all that.
So this is the book.
Vision is it? So there's a lot of
This is culture trauma.
Yeah.
Was she a part of that?
Yeah. One of the, she's been up on the stage several times, so I don't know which town you're talking about.
Incorporating that which culture, of course.
Big time.
Right.
I'll give it to you.
Anyway, I was like, and then when I did my internships, I did one in state mental hospital, which was great. It was one of the most intensive work I could get, which I did. And then I did some just counseling, but I was like, 28.
For sure.
And I was living in Southern California most of the time. So I heard about it. I did a visit with my cousin up in Austin.
Oh, yeah, there's.
This is right at the, in my grade school, we were required to be inside of there.
Now it's common.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's more so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be pretty soon, the next 3 or 4 hours, but I saw you at 7. I'm down to jail tonight.
Great to discover that now.
Yeah.
I ended up in the training field.
7 years.
It just feels like the house that you walk into that you're looking to buy. Oh, this is the mission.
You know, I would encourage people.
Possibly. Yeah. I hope so. So yeah, just shoot me. Okay. Awesome. Sounds good, man. Thank you. Peace.
That's pretty cool. At the combination
Oh.
Just like the coolest thing. I'm a engineer by trade, so I'm kind of shelving that one at the moment. Yeah, it's just trying to do all this other stuff outside of my main.
All right, everyone. So I think we're gonna get started here.
It's been pretty fun.
There.
Hi, how are you, Ed?
Very good. Very good. Welcome. Hi there.
Oh, cool. Visiting kids with their challenge. Be fun to sit and chat.
Sounds good. Yeah, find a spot. Awesome. Fun people here. This is great. Sweet. So yeah, we're gonna get started. My name is Evan, and I'm a organizer of Portland Psychedelic Society and an amateur mycologist nerd. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here today with everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have been, there's a few people that are contacting me. They're a little lost, and I apologize for how confusing this this building complex is. We're hopefully going to get some signs ordered to have around like every entrance of this building. Maybe you just need a new copy. But they'll be trickling in. Yeah, just wanted to say thanks for sticking to the RSVP that you had committed to. As you can see, there's not 75 people in this room, but that's how many people were on the RSVP list. I only make a big deal of it because this is a very popular event for PPS, and the wait list for this event, I don't know if anyone saw, but it was over 30 people. So I wouldn't be upset if it didn't mean that by not showing up and flaking to the RSVP, that meant that someone else that probably would have came didn't get to come. I don't mean to sound passive aggressive, and it's totally fine. I understand that things happen. I just want to express my gratitude for everyone here that did show up. It really means a lot to me, and I do these every month, so it's not a huge deal. But yeah, there's only one. Yes.
I noticed one thing in signing up, and when I signed RSVP, it automatically kicked in an extra person, so it said U+1. So I went back and deleted that after I figured that out, but you might be getting a lot of people doing that without realizing it.
There are definitely some people that add to it, and it does ask if you want to bring guests when you do sign up. I wasn't aware that it automatically enlists ones for you. I don't think it does. You might have accidentally.
I noticed it starting a different app. I didn't get into it. I just walked by hoping that other people didn't show up. So I don't know how you
Success. And that's, I should also say, that's what I always recommend to people. Anyone that's come up to me in the last 2 weeks to any PPS event and said, hey, I really want to go to your mushroom workshop, I'm on the wait list. I say, just come. Ignore the wait list, always. That's a risky thing to say, but here we are, and there's 10 spots open, and I probably told 20 people to ignore the wait list. So if I didn't tell those people, how many less people would be here? But anyways, thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to teach you how to grow mushrooms today. Yeah. So, Portland Psychedelic Society is a nonprofit organization here in the city of Portland. We aim to educate people about psychedelic medicines, how to use them, how they've been used historically and culturally, how to grow them, how to prepare for the experiences, how to integrate them. We have movie screenings at the Clinton Street Theater every month. We have an annual conference where we have tons of speakers come to the city that are doing psychedelic research worldwide. People like Fred. And yeah, so I've been working with the Portland Psychedelic Society for about a year now, and couldn't be happier with how much more deeply I've gotten involved with the organization. It's an amazing community, and I'm really, really, really grateful to be here. Some rules about the organization. So obviously, psychedelics are illegal. I'm sorry to disappoint anyone that wasn't aware of this issue. There is no soliciting of substances or services allowed.
Illegal.
I said, yeah.
Oh,
Did I say legal?
said legal.
Illegal.
They are
Yeah,
definitely
illegal.
illegal. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, use common sense. You know, a lot of people, unfortunately, come up to me and like ask me for mushrooms, and I'm like, you shouldn't do that.
So we can't buy cubes here?
You cannot buy mushrooms here, no.
Oh, okay.
But what you can do is learn how to grow them by yourself at your house and give them away to all of your friends. That's the point of today. And you can buy other things as well.
Spores are legal.
Spores are
That's the
legal.
interesting part.
Yeah.
That
It is
very
interesting.
Well, it's
Spores,
only if you're looking at
for
under a
research.
microscope.
Yeah.
yes, if spores are legal for microscopy research, and that's what we're here doing today is
Microscopic. research.
microscopic research.
Real tiny research.
Yes, totally. And I actually brought spore syringes today. That's another thing I'm trying to add into this workshop. I've, in the past, only been able to list websites. I'm still going to do that today, but if you want to leave this workshop today with a spore syringe, you'll be able to finally. So you won't have to go online for anything to get started. You could literally leave here tonight, go to Fred Meyer's, buy the supplies, go home, and start cultivating mushrooms. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah. Is anyone in this room already cultivating mushrooms? Medicinal or anything? Cool. Awesome. Disclaimer, I'm not an expert about growing mushrooms. I have my methods and I know that they work. But if you fellow mushroom cultivators want to share anything, helpful tips, anything like that, please do. I'm here to open up the space for accurate information, not so that I could feel like an expert. So, you know, I want people to get the right information, and I am confident I can deliver that, but if you want to add anything or change anything, please do. Also, the room is open to discussions, and so if you have any questions, just raise your hand, and I'm more than happy to answer them throughout the thing. All that I ask is, I guess I don't really know how to say this, but you know, at the previous times I've done this, there's been a lot of questions that would have been answered in like 30 seconds if I had just like kept going. So if we're talking about one specific subject like spores or like substrate, maybe wait until closer to the end of the topic. And I usually ask before moving on to any next bullet point if there's any questions. So because this is also being live streamed on YouTube right now. So people around the country and around the world are watching and are going to also be able to ask questions. Dawson is going to help deliver those questions from the internet to me in real time today. And yeah.
I am curious, do you work at all with the MAP Society? Are you
So
guys-
the MAPS organization is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies.
If you're gonna get into that later, then you can wait. but-
Yeah, me personally, yes, as a Zendo volunteer, Portland Psychedelic Society, yes, as a sponsor for some events, we've collaborated.
Okay, but not much integrated with their objectives and,
Not
Why not?
necessarily, no.
Okay.
But great friends as far as, you know, organizational relationships go. And high support of what MAPS does for the world. So that's Portland Psychedelic Society. I'll talk a little bit more about myself. Actually, I'll share a few more rules about the Psychedelic Society. Not rules, just information. Like I said, no soliciting substances or services in here. But this is a place to find community, you know, to find like-minded people, to find open-minded people, people that are interested in, you know, bettering themselves through use of psychedelics. So please, you know, I encourage you to connect with each other and help build a community. it's an awesome community to be a part of in Portland, in the Portland Psychedelic Society. Raise your hand if this is your first meeting. Cool, awesome, welcome. That makes me so happy. Yeah, and like I said, just use common sense. You know, we haven't had any scares. I am blown away by how open we've been able to be about all of these things. I mean, you just think about what's actually happening right now. We're all in a room about to learn how to grow psychedelic mushrooms. This like would not have been as cool or okay like 5 years ago. This is insane. This is like an insane point of history that we can do this. We can feel so safe in this room right now. Before I say that, is there any police officers in the room? Okay, cool. Totally trust all of you. Kind of. Yeah, so that being said, my name is Evan. I've been cultivating mushrooms for about 2 years now. Mushrooms are actually the entire reason that I'm in Portland and working for the Psychedelic Society. I was living at a intentional community / commune in Colorado in 2018, and I hitchhiked through Portland with my friend to attend the Plz PM conference. And while I was here, I met a underground psychedelic therapist, and we discussed sourcing the medicine that he was using to give to his patients. He was working with people dealing with end-of-life diagnoses, so helping cure the anxiety that comes with that. And that blew me away. That blew me away that there was, you know, a network like that in Portland, that was actually happening. That was so interesting to me. And like I said, we got to talking about sourcing, and he said he was getting frustrated with trying to find mushrooms. You know, interacting with drug dealers can be cool sometimes, but most of the times it's not. You know, it's a sketchy, most of the time uncomfortable experience, and no one really wants to deal with it. No one wants to be ripped off. No one wants to go to jail. And it's ridiculous that we have to consider those things around this, but hopefully after today, you never have to worry about that again. Anyways, I tell him that I grow mushrooms, and if he has any questions, feel free to call me. And I went back to Colorado with my friend, and 2 months later, I got a call from this gentleman asking me to come out to Portland to live at his house for free, to grow his mushrooms for his practice. And I was like, sweet. I'm so down. That's an awesome deal. I'm on my way. So yeah, I got to Portland last year in January. Set up a laboratory at his house, and I got a lot better at doing this. And yeah, started volunteering with the Portland Psychedelic Society in May of last year. Came to one of the meetings, and the host of the meeting stood up and said, hey, I'm not actually going to host this. I just wanted more meetings to happen on the west side, and so anyone that wants to host this, go for it, but I'm not. And then she sat down. And yeah, so I stood up, and yeah, I've been helping organize these meetings, trying to deliver what I think people want to know more about, and I think growing mushrooms, obviously, we're all proof that this is a cool thing to know. And I also just want to shout out, pay respects to that gentleman that brought me to Portland. His name was Matt, and he unfortunately passed away in September of last year in a motorcycle accident. So yeah, he was doing so much work with Portland Psychedelic Society, with the Psilocybin Service Initiative, with Decriminalized Nature. He was seriously kind of this invisible supporter of all these things happening in Portland, and did so much great work healing people as well. And so if we could just, a moment of silence for Matt. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna get right into it. Okay, so I'm just gonna lay out what the meeting is gonna look like here. I'm gonna talk a little bit about mushrooms and fungi in general, what they are and how they interact in the environment and what we're going to be trying to do with them, creating artificial environments in our homes. I'm going to go briefly over the two techniques that most people use, which is the PF tech method and the Monotub tech, which is the one that we're going to be learning today. I'm going to talk about spores, where to buy them, how to make them yourself, so that when you do buy them, you never have to buy them again. I'm going to talk about different forms of liquid culture so that you could propagate your spores and clean your cultures. I'm going to talk about sterile technique, and I'm going to talk about all the stages, obviously, of mushroom growing that we're going to be learning today, which is incubation, or injection, incubation, colonization, and fruiting. Those are the four main things that we're going to be covering today. So I am going to start with the mushroom life cycle. So mushrooms, as you may know them, look like this. There's a stalk or a stem, and there's a cap, and there are gills. Now, when I say mushroom, I no longer think of this, because this is actually the fruiting body of mushrooms. You can think about it like an apple to a tree. The mushrooms, when I say mushrooms, I actually think of mycelium, which is a web of it's the actual organism itself. It's the body that produces the actual mushrooms that we see and eat and get to enjoy. Now, these are called spores. They are microscopic seeds that will eventually turn into what we'll call hyphae. And when we put the spores into a favorable environment, like sterilized rye grain or popcorn kernels or birdseed or brown rice flour or even mulch, wood chips outside, they will grow and produce these hyphae, produce these strands to be able to absorb more nutrients to be able to spread the mycelium. Now, the mushrooms are fine as mycelium. They don't have to produce fruiting bodies. They produce fruiting bodies when they are in danger of dying off. Mushrooms can remain as mycelium for thousands of years, and they are totally fine. The largest organism on Earth is a giant colony of mycelium in Oregon. The largest organism on Earth is in this state right now, and it's massive, a massive colony of honey mushrooms in eastern Oregon. So when the mycelium experiences lack of nutrition or lack of hydration or lack of fresh air, it gets worried. It thinks, oh shit, this is the end for me. I gotta send off my offspring so that I can continue to survive as a species. So it creates these little tiny pins or buttons, and those are called primordium or pinheads, and those will eventually turn into our little mushrooms that will turn into the larger mushrooms. And then when the cap opens and the gills are exposed, they will sporulate, and the wind currents take these spores and bring them hopefully to other different environments. Mushrooms can produce trillions of spores. This colony of yellow oyster mushrooms is probably sporulating right now in this room, and we are watching thousands and thousands of spores. You know, we can't see them obviously because they're microscopic, but this colony of mycelium knows that it's near the end and it's trying to, you know, further its species on so that it doesn't die. Yeah, and you know, this is how lots of fungi work. But remember, not all fungi look like that. Very unique in its actual forms that they create. If you've ever seen a lion's mane mushroom, you know, or a cordyceps mushroom, you know that they can tend to look like aliens. But most psilocybin species are going to resemble this, you know, stereotypical mushroom. So, any questions about the life cycle of mushrooms?
So is it asexual reproduction? I was under the assumption that they had to have two separate
Yep. So
hyphae connect.
That's correct. So
Of
they
opposing to be able to produce.
they
But
release
maybe I'm
both
wrong.
male and female spores
Oh, from the same.
okay. And then they have to find each other and have you know, spore sex and spore sex on grain or something like that on mushrooms. It can't just be like in the air and then mushrooms are just exploding all around us. But that'd be awesome.
But it doesn't mind incest, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
It's a weird way to put it. Yeah. So that is the life cycle. Now the role of mushrooms in the environment. What are these things on the planet to do? Mushrooms decompose 90% of organic waste in the natural world. If we did not have mushrooms ingrained everywhere through our forests and through every ecosystem, even our own bodies, our gut bacteria, you know, they're doing so much work for us all the time within our, you know, stuff. They decompose 90% of what the forests produce. And if we didn't have them, we wouldn't have a planet, basically. They've been here for billions of years, or yeah, millions of years. And some people think they're even actual aliens. They think that spores were brought to Earth on a comet and germinated and colonized parts of the world, and that's not that hard to believe. Recently, because we found that spores can survive in extremely harsh environments like, you know, the North Pole and actually in space. So they're amazing organisms, and I am obsessed with them. So we have different types of mushrooms. We have saprophytic mushrooms. And what saprophytic mushrooms do is they decompose. They will colonize dead trees, any dead organic matter in the environment and help break it down and then produce the fruiting bodies from that dead organic matter and continue to do that throughout the forest. And sometimes that's not good when you consider the parasitic mushrooms that do that to living organisms. You know, they'll infect trees, plants, even, you know, insects, and use them to extract nutrients from and then spread. That largest colony in the world that I talked about, honey mushrooms are a parasitic species, and they're also known as meadow makers for their ability to completely wipe out forests and turn them into meadows. It's kind of messed up. They're still cool mushrooms. But we also have mycorrhizal Z.
So that giant mushroom
Yeah.
is a field.
Is
Forested because it's not mycorrhizal.
It's parasitic, but it's colonizing a huge plot of land right now, like thousands of acres consisting of forest, prairies, and a bunch of different ecosystems.
without completely killing the forest.
It's a slow process for sure. And some of them, like I said, some of them it's just the mycelium, so when I say that honey mushrooms colonizing that space, some of them aren't even producing any fruiting bodies because they're fine. They're just chilling, they're dormant, and they're going to be there for a very, very, very long time. Mycorrhizal mushroom species are mushroom species that need a different organism to survive. They are very beneficial. Species like morels, for example, they grow near the roots of maple trees and oak trees, and they form these symbiotic relationships with the roots of the trees and of other plants, and so they work together to deliver nutrients to the trees in order to sustain the environment.
Is azarensis an example of that?
Yes, azarescens are an example of that. Azarescens are a species of mushrooms that grow mainly on the coast of Oregon. They're on the cover of Paul Stamets' book, Psilocybin Mushrooms of the World. He actually named the mushrooms himself. Yeah, and we'll go over a little bit about foraging wild species here in the Pacific Northwest towards the end of this discussion. So, we got the different types of mushrooms, and most mushrooms that contain psilocybin are saprophytic mushrooms. So they are going to be breaking down and decomposing the material. So our job is to create an environment filled with a landscape that can sustain mycelium and can provide nutrition to these mushrooms that will eventually wear off so that they feel the need to produce. For instance, this bag contains 50% soy powder and 50% oak sawdust. There's not a lot of nutrition in oak sawdust, but there is in soy, and that's what the mushroom is using to absorb nutrients. The mycelium is releasing enzymes onto the substrate that also looks like this in the beginning. You can tell this is, fully colonized. It's all white, and it's producing mushrooms on the top. Yeah. Any questions about the different types? Okay, so I mentioned that today we'll be learning the Monotub technique, but I wanted to touch on the PF Tech method and what it is and why we're learning the Monotub today. So the PF Tech consists of colonizing your substrate, or colonizing it is substrate, using not seeds or berries, but brown rice flour, vermiculite, and water. And so they form these little tiny cakes inside the jars. And then what you do in the PF Tech method is you lay perlite down, and then when you have a fully colonized jar, you simply pop the mycelial cake onto the perlite, and then mushrooms fruit from the cake inside the container. Now, this is a great method for beginners, but I don't think it's all that much safer than the Monotub, and you get a lot less yield in my experience, because you could imagine you have maybe 4 cakes inside this tub, and they're producing maybe a quarter of an ounce per cake, and that's 1 flush, so you maybe get an ounce per flush. Now what we're doing with the Monotub is we are taking the myceliated colonized spawn, and then we are going to do a second round of colonization by preparing a substrate, laying that down in our tub, and then mixing the seed and the spawn with that layer, with that substrate, and then that whole bin is going to be colonized mycelium, and then we're gonna fruit the entire thing. The whole thing will grow mushrooms, and it'll, you know, yeah, fruit within our whole tub. So it just seems to me that monotubs make the most sense because for not that much more work, you get usually 3 or 4 times the mushrooms. And if it's like, if that's not your goal, that's understandable why you want to go with the PF Tech. But I always enjoy having more mushrooms, so maybe that's just me. So that's the PF Tech, but like I said, today we're going to be learning about the Monotub. And like I said, we're going to go over four main steps. So there's inoculation, incubation. I should number these. 1, 2, colonization.
No, I primarily came to understand the just general concept of growing mushrooms.
Uh-huh.
Is that true of this process when we're talking about that? For any of these that have the typical fruiting body, whether they're the psychedelics or not, does this method apply?
Can you use the monotub to grow?
Pretty much anything that would produce the typical style mushroom.
Yes and no. There's a lot of variants. For instance, azurescens are extremely hard to produce inside environments because they prefer
Mycorrhizal.
Yeah, they're mycorrhizal, and they prefer, you know, the sand dunes of the northern Oregon coast, and so that's mainly where you'll find them. Yeah.
What substrate do you prefer? Like what grain or?
So I have been using rye grain. I'm actually going to save that question because I'll just go into more detail when we get to the inoculation. Thanks, Dustin.
But for the most part, you're saying that it should apply for most, but that I suppose the ones that are saprophytic, anything that falls in the saprophytic category should apply for being able to.
Yes, they just differ a lot. You know, like for instance, morels, almost impossible to grow inside a monotub. Azurescens is almost impossible to grow inside a monotub. But for most of them, this process will work. Okay. So if you wanted to order different species of mushrooms online and you wanted to experiment, the monotub is a great way to experiment growing different types.
Thank
you. Yeah. As is the bag method, but this is just not the most sustainable and reusable method of growing mushrooms. You know, we're wasting a lot of plastic when we do this. But you know, it gets the job done. And I appreciate you just wanting to learn more about the mushroom process because I've been a little concerned with how many people are actually able to take the information that we present here today and then feel motivated and confident enough to go home and actually start doing it. And so, you know, as a presenter and as a teacher of this, I'm trying to figure out ways that I can give people more tools to be able to do that. And so today I brought spores so that you don't have to go online and try ordering those. And I also brought one of grow kits. So these are oyster mushrooms. It is spawn that is, or substrate that is already sterilized, already inoculated with oyster mushroom mycelium. So if you take this bag and you take it home and you leave it on your kitchen counter, within 1 to 2 weeks, it will look like this. And all you'll have to do is cut the top of the bag off, fold it down, spray it a couple times if it looks dry throughout the week, and then it will eventually look like this.
Could you mix that in with the monotub? Just take that at some stage and just spread it throughout the monotub.
If you wanted to make substrate here, you could use
yield. Starting with one of those start bags.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And you could toss this in your yard if you wanted to, and create a huge bed in your backyard if you wanted to with oyster mushrooms. It'd be a little harder to control because you think about what we're doing here. We are basically playing God, right, and creating this little tiny microclimate that we, you know, control every single aspect of. We control and filter out the bacteria. That doesn't happen in nature. In nature, it's chaos, right? There's all these different, you know, bacteria flying around, different creatures and organisms always fighting to survive, and yeah, we're giving whatever mushroom we want a free pass, and kind of saying we'll make sure you're okay, and we'll protect you as long as you produce mushrooms for us to eat. Yeah.
How many flushes do you get out of a bag?
Usually 2 to 3. Yeah, so that's probably 5 pounds of mushrooms here, maybe a little less.
Wow.
And so that's a beautiful first flush. The second one would probably be half that, and then the third would be even less, and then they start to look uglier as the flushes happen. So like I said, today, if you want to get started doing this, I highly recommend grabbing one of these bags at the end to familiarize yourself with the process, because once you see that it's so simple, this does not seem nearly as intimidating. It's just like, gardening carrots or vegetables or anything like that. It can be as simple. So I have, I think I have about 10 of those. So, and the next workshop, I hope to have many, many more. So.
What varieties do you have?
Mostly oyster, yellow oyster, blue oyster, Italian oyster. Yeah, they're resilient mushroom species that are going to work for you. There was another question I thought that okay, cool, right on. So, yeah, getting back into the cultivation cycle. Like I said, inoculation, incubation, colonization, fruiting. Inoculation is the process of taking whatever we have, spores, liquid culture, agar wedge, and inoculating a jar of spawn. So whether it's rye grain, there's a bunch of other ones that we could use that I will list soon. And we will be colonizing it with mushroom mycelium, and then we will be that process is called incubation. So when we inoculate the mushrooms, we need to put them in a warm, dark environment for them to colonize the whole jar, and then they'll stay there and they'll stay safe as they colonize whatever you're using. And then there's, like I said, the second stage of colonization where we take what we just colonized in the jar and use it to colonize our tub. And then there's another stage of incubation as well that we have to maintain and make sure that we don't get contaminated. And then we fruit. And then I guess there should be a fifth one, drying and eating. Healing. It's like 7.
The protection from how you said protecting, I forget how you put that.
Protecting from bacteria
and whatnot. Would that just simply modify yield, reduce yield, or would
contamination will end the whole process?
Okay.
Yeah, it is like the big red button that destroys the whole operation. It's why sterile technique is so important. It's the #1 rule of mushroom cultivation, if you want to actually produce mushrooms, is sterile technique. Because, like I said, we are giving a specific mushroom species a free pass, and we are saying we will create this environment for you and only you to thrive. But it's a desirable environment. There's a lot of different bacteria that want to get in on that free pass. Lots of different contaminations. You just think about this room right now. What's floating around in this air? I know it's kind of gross to think about, but like so many like dead skin cells and bacteria, and even fungal spores right now from our yellow oyster friends are just everywhere all the time. So another thing you want to consider before you get started with all this is, do you have a space at your house for this to work? Do you have a room that you can make sterile enough to be able to do this work in? And if you don't, that's okay. That's why we have this. This is a still air box. I just want to make sure that I'm going in order and staying staying organized here. So I'll go to the sterile technique. Before you start, I mean, you could get all the supplies, but before you actually start working with anything, you're gonna want to clean your house. You're gonna want to make sure that there's not a lot of dust everywhere, and you want to make sure that you maybe even shampooed your carpets. You're just trying to get all of this bacteria, as much of it out of your house as you possibly can. And then when choosing a spot to grow, you want to be strategic and not have it, say, in a hallway in the main floor of your house where tons of people are walking through and dragging a bunch of bacteria in every single day. A closet and maybe a spare bedroom is a much better option, or a bathroom downstairs that people don't usually use. Bathrooms are desirable because we do clean them more often than other places in the house, but there is also obviously more bacteria in there. So just be strategic when you try to find a place within your house to do this. But if your house is an older house and it's usually dusty, just know that there are ways to work within that system to still be able to produce mushrooms. You don't have to live in a brand new house to be able to do this.
What about a house air filter system? You see these box filters.
That's a really good idea, for sure. Yeah. There's a million ways to increase protection and increase sterile technique. We're going to be talking about what's called a flow hood to work with. It's kind of like a still air box in that it allows you to do this work in this little protected environment. But a flow hood is a huge air filter that shoots pressurized air at you, and it basically just neutralizes any bacteria that's flying in the air, so that every movement you make is completely clean and you don't have to worry about anything getting anywhere when you open up jars of vulnerable mycelium, or you colonize, or you inoculate anything. The flow hood basically just protects you. But a cheap flow hood is like $800. The flow hood that we use at my job, I work at a mushroom farm, farming oyster mushrooms and chestnuts and lion's mane. The flow hood there cost $5,000. So I'm going to be teaching how to grow mushrooms for under $100. It should not cost you more than $100 if you go to Fred Meyer's and you buy all the supplies that I'm going to list here today, and you get your spores. It would be usually under that. And then once you produce mushrooms, well worth it.
Totally unrelated, but where's the nearest bathroom?
It's down the hall to the right.
I think I did mine for under 50.
Under 50?
Yeah.
There you go, people. So flow hoods, great idea, especially if you're getting serious about it, And I hope that you do really enjoy this hobby, and I hope that you do spread to other species, because they're just awesome organisms to mess around with and to grow and to eat and to play with. Yeah.
You're not implying that you can have a home version of the flow hood with the box. That's just an example that you're using with your tools, cutting your little tub.
So this is not a this is different from a flow hood in that it's just a sterile technique.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, gotcha. It's completely separate from a flow hood. A flow hood is a large.
I'm a pharmacist. I'm familiar with worked in
Oh,
flow hoods,
perfect.
but yeah, I just wasn't sure if you were saying that you could have some sort of your own home version, like where you're doing the flow hood with your own.
Not inside here, but you can build your own flow hoods at home with HEPA filters and equipment, but it's still expensive.
Yeah.
Like I know people that have flow hoods and they're just amateur mycologists that are messing around in their basements, but it definitely costs more than $500 to build whatever they did. It's a serious investment. Okay. Sweet. So that being said, I also want to talk about other things that you're going to need for sterile technique. You're going to need to make a spray. You don't have to. You can use Lysol, but a spray disinfectant is very important in being able to grow mushrooms. My recipe I will put on the board. So I use 75% water, 10% white vinegar, 5% hydrogen peroxide, or sorry about that, 10% hydrogen peroxide, 5% vodka, or rubbing alcohol, just alcohol in general, but I use vodka. And then I just put a couple drops of essential oils in mine as well, just because it smells nice. You know, it's like one of the worst things about Lysol that I hate is that it smells, you know, it's so like chemically and gross, and it's not safe for you or any organ. Like, I mean, yes, it disinfects and kills bacteria, but it's also just very harmful chemicals that you're spraying into your house all the time. So I always recommend that you know, make something yourself at home naturally, and this will kill 99% of bacteria. And you can experiment with this as well and make it your own. Like I said, there's a ton of ways to do this.
You're just putting that in a spray bottle or something?
Okay. And then, like I said, clean your whole house. You don't have to do that every time you mess around with your mushrooms, but before you start this month-long process, one deep clean is a really good idea. And then disinfecting a whole room or whatever you're going to be working in, the whole closet, with something like rubbing alcohol or the disinfectant spray is a really good idea, just wiping everything down once over. And then when you do work with it, you know, say it's your day of the week that you've scheduled to colonize or to, you know, to do the chores of this this process, you're going to want to make sure that you've just showered, you got clean clothes on, you know, your fingernails are cut, all these, you know, you're just going to try to mitigate as much risk as you possibly can, you know, before I start. Like I said, I'll take a shower, I'll put my hair up in a bun, I wear gloves. My boss goes pretty far with this, and when I come to work and we're inoculating, he's walking around in basically a hazmat suit, you know, or even sometimes just a Tyvek suit. You can get those from Ace Hardware, they're like $10. But it's a good idea, and it just like feels so fun to like be wearing them. Yeah, so that is Sterile Technique, and then like I said, we have this still air box here. So this is a how many quarts? Probably like 60 quart, something like that, tote container. And what I did is I used a tin coffee can and I put it on my stove for 10 seconds, and then I just pressed it against the plastic of the box. Boop, pops right through. You can use a hole saw or something like that if you want to, but whatever way is easiest for you. You're going to want to, every time you use this, take rubbing alcohol or your disinfectant spray and sterilize the whole container before you start putting stuff in it. And then usually what people will do, and I just haven't added this to this is my example air box, but people will take the gloves and attach some type of like PVC pipe to the opening, and then we'll glue the gloves inside so that you could actually just pull your hands out and then it just like comes out, you know, the glove, and then you can put it back in. You don't have to worry about, you know, opening it and putting your gloves back in, because you think about how much bacteria just got on my glove just from doing that, and then I'm going to stick that into the box. Just trying to be very mindful of all of that, you know what I mean? I know it can be tedious, but even as far as like, you know, making sure that you're making quick, precise movements when you are inoculating and moving things around. Just trying to constantly mitigate the risk of introducing other bacteria to your precious, vulnerable, you know, little ecosystem here. So, things that we'll use the still air box for is things like inoculation. When we take the spore syringe and we actually inject them into the jars, you're going to want to do that inside here. Did you have a question? No, right on.
I have a question actually. Just imagining where I might be doing this.
Mhm.
It's going to be pretty hard to sterilize the room. Can you just put up like plastic sheeting or something like that?
Sure.
I mean, a little
You can
scary
get-
looking, but
Yeah, depending on how much space you have, totally. If you're working with a bigger room and there's not another purpose for that big room, I've seen people get little tiny greenhouses. You can get a greenhouse on Amazon for less than $100, around like 80 to $100, and it's just, I mean, it's so flimsy and cheap and just stupid, but it's like, you think about it, it's making this perfect little space, you know, that you can work inside of, you know, they're like 5 by 5, it's not bad. Or you could even get like a Martha Stewart rack. That's what I have in my house. You know, it's just this, you know, big shelving unit with a plastic all around it. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about spores now. So, like I said, spores are the microscopic organisms that will eventually have sex and create the mushroom mycelium. And they, yeah, are produced from the gills. I'm going to list some websites where you can purchase spores if you feel so inclined. There is mushrooms.com. There's Spore Trader, I think .com, Sporeworks. There's also Reddit, which is how I always got my spores. If you're a user of Reddit, you understand how subreddits work. If you are not a user of Reddit, I'm not going to explain how to do it. But yeah, it's basically just a social media platform, and you can create tiny communities inside of it. For instance, there's a subreddit for the Portland Psychedelic Society. What is it?
I think it's just PPS.
R-PPS.
I can check it real quick, actually.
Yeah, so if you go onto Reddit, r-spore trader or r-shrooms will, you know, introduce you to a lot of people that will send you spores. Like I said, today, I actually brought, I think I have about 20 spore syringes. So these are Golden Teachers and Z strain, both pretty resilient strains that are good for beginners that I have here, that you'll be able to use and purchase at the end if you feel so inclined. Yeah.
It's r-Portland Psych Society.
Portland Psych Society. You probably could find spores on there as well. Yeah, so I'm going to teach us how to make a spore syringe right now.
You said you're YouTube live streaming this?
Yes.
Is it showing the board?
Not completely, no, because if you focus on the board, then the focus keeps going in and out. So I have it focused just on the table for now.
Gotcha.
So this will be accessible later as well?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And can you put the stuff on the board?
After it's all done, I plan on taking the video and going up and like giving more detail of the table and the things and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're working at the Portland Psychedelic Society to film an actual Monotub video, because the last one that we filmed of last month's workshop, I think is up to like 28,000 views right now,
Wow.
which is sweet, but people are pretty frustrated with the fact that it's not like I'm catering to you all in this room, because Portland Psychedelic Society is who I'm serving, not 28,000 people on YouTube. It's cool that they get to, you know, enjoy the information, but there's so many comments about people that are frustrated with this silly questions that come in. They're not silly, there's no dumb questions, and yeah, I hope you're enjoying it, but I'm definitely not catering it to the YouTube. But I would like for people on YouTube to be able to get an accurate and precise explanation of all this. So we're going to be filming within the next month or so, one that just takes it through, and it's literally just going to be me and a cameraman showing the whole process, so that there's not lots of confusion. And then we'll just answer the questions on the comments as they come in because there's always tons of them. So that's how the YouTube is gonna work. Yeah, so spore syringe. First, we're gonna talk about a spore print. Lost my marker. So, spore print. This is what a spore print looks like. It's on my shirt right now. Kind of looks like an eyeball. It's pretty cool. A lot of people use them to make different kinds of art. You know, we'll incorporate them into canvas pieces, and even if you can like put it on the bill of a hat, and it'll just drop all of its prints. So to make a spore syringe, or to make a spore print, you pick a mushroom. You can do this to any mushroom you find in the wild that has a cap and a stem that is relatively clean. And I'll use one of our little friends here to show you. Sorry. Okay, so we've got a mushroom, okay, with a stem and a cap. To create a spore print, and this is a little harder because you can tell that it's more of a convex shape towards the top and not the usual like stem going up and the cap coming down. But to make a spore print, you will take a piece of tin foil, you know, just as big enough as you need to hold the cap. And then you will cut the cap at the stem, and then you will lay it face down on the tin foil. And then you will take a cup, you know, hopefully a clean cup, this one, bear with me, and you will put it over the, I'll hold this up. You will put it over the tin foil and the cap.
Tilt it there, yeah.
White tin foil versus white paper or black paper, I've seen that. As
Just
suggestions
easier
as well.
to fold up and store.
Oh, okay,
really.
so
So
not
paper
just
totally-
for the identification purposes, but for
No,
storing that.
we're gonna hope that you know what type of mushroom you're making a spore print of. But yeah, he brings up a great point. When foraging in the wild, this is a great technique to help identify a species, because in books like, you know, All the Rain Promises and More, you know, which is just a guide showing people how to pick mushrooms around the West Coast, you know, we're looking at identification characteristics to help us identify how to do this. So things like the color of the cap and the shape of the mushroom, but also the colors of the spores, because they all vary. And psilocybin species produce dark gray or purple or black spores. So that's another easy way to identify them in the wild. If you aren't sure and you pick them, I'm not saying this is the deciding factor, and if it has black spores, boom, eat it, it's a magic mushroom. Do not eat it. Make sure you consult with someone that knows how to identify if you are picking outdoors. And then if they confirm it, save it so you can make a spore print and you can maybe use it again. But so what's gonna happen here is, and the cup is put there so that other bacteria and fungal spores aren't falling all over our print while we're waiting for it to drop. But like I said, all these mushrooms are dropping spores right now. And if you leave the mushroom on the tin foil for about 30 minutes to an hour, you will have a spore print that is produced on the tin foil. And you're going to take that tin foil and you're going to put it in a plastic bag and you're going to label it and you're going to save it. And most mycologists have spore banks with, you know, a bunch of different spores that they've collected, and they can use anytime they want. So we have this spore print now, and you can just imagine that there's, you know, the thing on the tinfoil. What you'll do next is, in a sterile environment, so we're going to put this stuff back on there. You are going to take, I don't have a small little cup, which is extremely unfortunate because that would help me explain this a lot. But we can also use an agar plate. So we have everything we need. We just need, yeah, I'll just explain it. Heads
Have you pre-sterilized the?
Yep, wipe everything down before everything goes in
Tin
there.
foil though, that you're doing the spore print onto?
You don't need to pre-sterilize the tin foil. If you just make sure you rip off a piece, cut it off, and then use a new piece, and the underside is sterile enough.
Okay.
Yeah. So to make your own spore syringe, what you're going to do is you're going to take the tin foil, and this should all be done in the still air box to help prevent contamination. You're gonna take the tin foil and you're gonna have the powder or spores on the tin foil. You're gonna take a sterilized scalpel or sterilized any type of whatever tool you're using, and you are going to scrape some of the spores into a clean cup. And then you are going to take the cup and pour distilled or sterilized water into the cup and shake it around so that the spores are, mixed in with the water. And then all you're going to do is you're going to take your sterilized syringe and you are going to put it in the cup and suck up your water that now has your little spore powder. And now you have a spore syringe. And spore syringes are expensive. They cost anywhere from $10 to $20 online, sometimes even more than that, depending on the strain. But you can literally make them for free forever if you just have one fresh fruit body of a psilocybin species mushroom.
You use just one cap of spores per syringe?
One cap can make up to 20 syringes.
So about how much water are you talking about adding?
Well,
I mean, you can pull that up,
In the cup.
but like in the cup when you're doing.
you could even, so when we get to sterilization, it's always a good idea to take a jar and sterilize a jar of water, or you could just use pre-distilled water. But if you want to be precise, you could literally just fill up the water, put the distilled water into the cup with the spores, and then just soak it back up, and there will literally be the perfect amount that you'll need.
Yeah, but you're starting with what, like about a cup's amount worth of water?
Yeah.
Of sterilized water?
Yeah.
Regardless of source.
Yeah.
But you could even use, I'm assuming, a home filtered water that you then boiled for 15 minutes.
Yep, you can sterilize your own water for sure.
You good with that?
Totally.
Yeah.
Water's, a very abundant resource.
I just didn't know if it mattered, some of the chlorine content or some of the other things in there, if that would, at all.
Yeah, boiling
Bother it.
it's a great idea.
That doesn't, boiling it doesn't remove those additional items, but
Right.
Home tap boiling sounds like it's fine, so, okay.
So how many, are you scraping all of the spores into the cup or just some of the spores into
Just
the
some
cup?
of them.
Okay.
Why not just do them all
Um,
up and then make it?
Because, well, you can, and you can have a very, very powerful syringe, but you could also make, think about it. There is, per spore print, thousands, maybe even millions of spores on the spore print. You need 2. So it's like you could make tons and tons and tons of them, or you could just make one. That's totally fine, up to you.
Going back to your mention of the spore bank,
Mhm.
Is there a shelf life?
A couple years is what I've heard, but I've heard of them lasting way longer.
Do they
Oh,
last-
of the spores on the tinfoil.
Yeah, and do they last any longer in a syringe, or what's the better way to store?
If you know you're not going to be using them for a while, definitely in the tinfoil, in a plastic bag. And if you put them in the freezer or in your refrigerator, they should last forever, literally forever. It does get a little more complicated when you put it in the spore syringe, because this might not have been sterilized completely or well enough. And so, it could get contaminated inside. But not really with just water. There's not a whole lot of nutrients to be contaminated. It's just the spores. So even then, they'll last for years. And Jen?
That was my question.
Oh, perfect. All right.
Thanks.
Amazing. Yes.
How long after you pick the mushroom do you have to make the spore print?
You should, so after you pick it, it should be immediately done. There shouldn't be a whole lot of waiting before you do that. And then also, we're gonna get into this later of optimal fruiting and picking conditions. But when your mushrooms are fruiting inside your monotub, they're going to, like I said, start as little pins, little babies, and then they're gonna grow up, kind of look like penises. and then they're gonna look like bigger penises. And then that is going to turn into it's so much fun. Your actual mushroom. So you can imagine the shape that happens. But as this opens up, there's going to be what is called a veil that is going to pop down. It's just the protective barrier, the protective skin of the mushroom, and that's going to break, and it's going to expose the gills. And then the veil is just going to, be on the stem, and then they'll start sporulating. And trust me, when you get to this process, as soon as you start seeing these, you're going to start checking every day because you're going to be so excited. And when that happens, when the veil breaks and you start dropping spores, you need to start picking them. Because as they lose spores, they, one, are known to lose potency, and two, those spores are going to fall on top of all the other mushrooms that you are growing, and they're going to start to like discolor them, and then they're going to get gross, and then it's prone to more contamination. You can just have tons of spores trying to survive in this environment that's already ending. So when it gets to like in between here, like right after that pops, but it'll be a little bit more open, then top it off, spore print. You can make a spore print off of every single mushroom that you pick if you wanted to. That'll be a little tedious and it won't be a lot of a point, unless you wanted to start selling spore prints online, which you totally could.
So are you saying that really you should harvest all your mushrooms when the veil breaks?
Yep. Totally.
Oh.
And it won't happen conveniently that every mushroom will be ready and then the veil will break and you can harvest all of them at once.
Yeah, okay.
You're gonna have to do it, in tandem, but yeah, so that's that. I'll probably leave that, because we'll come back to that towards the end when we talk about fruiting. So yeah, now you have a spore syringe that you've created yourself off of a mushroom that you've harvested. And like I said, you could make 10 off of a cap if you wanted to, and you'll never have to buy spore syringes ever again. Yes?
So does it work well to kind of take one full spore print, put it in a cup of water, and then draw out of that, like, or dump 20 syringes worth into a cup and go from there?
Yep. Yeah.
And then when you're saving that spore print, you actually fold that foil up, or how does it?
Yeah, I usually, just fold it up. You could do that, or you could just keep it like that. And if you put it in a paper bag, and you just make sure that you're like keeping it, like not doing that,
Do they stick?
Do the spores, yeah, they can be,
Oh, but they stick to the tin foil.
Yeah, totally.
Now, you said put it in a paper bag. If you're long-term storing, you'd have it on there in a plastic bag in the freezer?
Plastic bag, yeah.
Okay. You said paper, so.
Got it. Yeah, plastic bag. Yeah, so now I'm going to talk about liquid cultures, and I'm going to talk about agar. And this is new. I've never taught people about these two things in a workshop ever before, but as I start to work with them myself, I do see the importance. So I'm happy to teach people about it today. I don't have an example of what liquid culture looks like, but basically what liquid culture is it's the distilled or sterilized water with nutrients added that you can use to basically clean cultures. We soaked up all of the spores into our spore syringe, but there's no saying, we didn't also soak up other bacteria, and now we have a risky spore syringe, and when we take that and we inject it into our jar, things can go very wrong. We might just have to toss the whole jar if it gets contaminated, like this one is. So going into liquid cultures and going into agar is a way to ensure that the spores that you're working with, the culture you're working with, is clean and is strong and healthy and ready to colonize. So I'll start with liquid culture. So I'm going to list a recipe. There's a ton of different recipes that people like using, and they can affect different mushrooms in different ways. But So, liquid culture, I use 1 teaspoon of malt sugar or light corn syrup or honey. Malt sugar, corn syrup, or honey.
Malt sugar, malt syrup.
Malt sugar, corn syrup, or honey. Malt sugar is what you just get at a grocery store or health food store.
Because I've used malt syrup before.
Same,
Not for this, but for other things.
and same thing. You can use, like I said, these
Or a
are only
teaspoon.
3 out of like 100 things that people use. Some people use, I was talking with my boss yesterday at the mushroom farm. He's using coconut water. It's got a lot less sugars and nutrients, but cordyceps mushrooms really like it for some reason. So, you get to experiment with all these different types of species and what works best. But psilocybin, generally these 3 are going to work great. And then this with 100 milliliters of water, distilled or sterilized, making sure it's clean water, is all you need to have a liquid culture ready to be inoculated with your spores.
Is there concern about the introduction of bacteria with the addition of the malt sugar, corn syrup, or honey? Should those be added to the 100 milliliters of water and then sterilize that through a boiling process after the fact? Or has that not really been an issue?
That hasn't been an issue, but there is possibilities for it. Like things like honey, could caramelize if you cook it for too long. But yeah, you could, as far as I know, you could sterilize them together.
I'm just wondering, but you don't take that step, like when you're pouring in the corn syrup, but I suppose you just are buying a brand new one and keeping it in the box, and that's how you're avoiding the fact that, because if you've been using corn syrup in your kitchen and now you're going to use them there,
Totally.
I assume has
Then you are mixing it and then sterilizing it. So even if you use gross corn syrup from your kitchen,
you are sterilizing.
then you're going to pop it in the pressure cooker when you do everything else, and it'll get sterilized, and now you'll have this stuff ready to go. And so I really wish I had an example, but if you could just try to visualize, you're going to have this, it could be colored or it could not be. Honey turns it usually like this beautiful golden color, and it's this this liquid culture can be inoculated with your spores, and the mycelium will actually grow in the liquid. So you'll have this like web of mycelium inside of it that is prone to contamination. So be aware of that. But it's just another good way to store your spores and to easily use them. Because if you take mycelium out of there, and then you take that and you put it in your spawn that you've prepared, it's going to go a lot faster, and you can be confident that they're clean and they're going to do what you want them to do in here, as long as these are also clean and sterile. So, like I said, not necessary. I didn't even used to teach these at the other ones. You could just go straight from spore syringe, boom, but much higher risk of contamination. This does help alleviate a lot of the risk. Now, I'm going to go a step further and explain what this is. This is agar. Is anyone familiar with agar? Okay, perfect. So agar is this weird gelatinous material. It's extracted from seaweed, and it doesn't have any nutrients really to itself. But if you heat it up with sterilized water, it can be formed into this weird gelatinous material. When you pour it and you let it cool, it gets solid, like this. It's not dripping or anything. It's like this solid little plate. But to grow mushrooms, or to colonize that with mycelium, you will need to add some type of starch, some type of form of nutrition for the mycelium to be able to grow on it. So an agar recipe that I will share, I'll do that here.
Are you done with the liquid culture?
Yeah. Do you have a question?
I did.
Yeah.
So are you putting that in basically one of these size bottles? When you're
I
making
use
that?
this. I use this size jar.
So that size jar, and then you're pressure cooking it to sterilize it before or after you've added the spores to it? Because I imagine that would kill
Definitely
the spores.
before. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're doing that and then putting it in the box and through the box, then adding.
Correct.
Inoculating. Okay.
And then how many jars can you inoculate after the mycelium grows?
It depends on how much water is in the jar, it depends on how much you're using or how much you have available to spread out. But from a jar this size
Yeah.
filled with, that much liquid culture that's been colonizing for a month, you can probably do 10 jars.
Oh, wow.
So you think about what you'll be able to multiply that into.
And once again, do you suck it out with the syringe or you pull
Yes.
it out? Okay,
Yep, sucking it out with the sterile syringe,
okay.
and then, going through all the other sterile techniques that we're gonna talk
Okay.
about. So, yeah,
What PSI are you sterilizing on for how long?
15 minutes for the liquid culture, about, 15 PSI, but same, 10, 15 minutes is all you need. You want to be very careful about overcooking this. And if you do, you lose a teaspoon of honey, it's not that big of a deal, but it's kind of annoying if it does caramelize, you're not going to be able to use it as well.
That's only with honey though. If you use the other two items, you're not as concerned about that.
Yeah.
Malt sugar. Good.
Are you just putting the liquid culture like in a mason jar or something like that?
Mhm.
And you're sterilizing the jar, obviously.
Yes,
first,
and you're
right?
also going to want to make sure that you have a lid that has injection ports to be able to stick the syringe in. And I'm going to talk about those in just a few more minutes.
You don't have to, he mentioned the pre-sterilization of the jar, but the process of going through that will sterilize both. You don't have to pre-sterilize, yeah, okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, just finishing on agar, the recipe is 5 grams of agar. You can get it at like health food stores. You can just buy it on Amazon if you want to, although I don't suggest Amazon.
Medical supply.
Malt sugar, and then just 250 milliliters of water, sterilized water, and that you can make in one of these jars. And you'll have this liquid, and then once you sterilize it, it will you'll have to let it cool, and then you take it and you pour it into your Petri dishes, or you could use small jars like this. These can be utilized as agar trays too. You just want to make sure that it's not deep like this, because what you're going to do is you're going to take a scalpel and you're going to cut off wedges. If you could see this one, you could see the wedges that we've cut off of it. And so we have this pure culture that is completely colonized, and you look at what will happen is you put a little wedge on, it'll spread. You can see that it is in a circular shape, and that it started small and it will go until it becomes this. And so I'm going to pass these around and people can observe these. I'm going to start this one there. I'm just going to pass it on.
Your measurements up there, I can't read it from here.
5 grams of agar,
Okay, got it.
5 grams of malt sugar or other nutrient base, and 250 milliliters of water.
Thank you.
Of course. Other questions about agar? Yeah.
Do you have any preference on brand for agar? I've been using stuff from like New Seasons, and then I've had
New Seasons, any
practice
health
on
food
Amazon.
store is great. You can rely on the fact that they've sourced it organically, and it's high quality stuff. Yes.
All right, so the agar, you mixed all that stuff together and then you pressure cook that? I missed what you said there.
Yeah, you mix all of that together and then you toss it in your pressure cooker. Some people even just microwave it. I don't suggest that. I mean, pressure cooker is always the way to go to be completely confident in sterilization. But then, you're gonna want to make sure that you cool it down, and then when it gets to what I think is 108 degrees, then it's time to pour. Because if you wait too long, then this whole thing is just gonna, become this giant agar, like mush. Yeah.
Can it be reconstituted?
Totally. Yeah. So if you miss your point and then you just have to cook it again, it's totally fine. No big deal at all.
You wouldn't have to recook, you just have to reheat it up to the point of
Right.
pour.
That's correct.
Okay.
What's the pour off temperature?
108. Yeah.
And that was 15 minutes, 15 PSI for the
15
agar
minutes.
too?
10 to 15 minutes. 15 psi.
No, that's gonna be Fahrenheit on the 108.
Thank you.
Is that for both agar and
Correct. And liquid culture.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, where are you pouring the liquid culture to? Also in petri dishes or?
No, the liquid culture can stay in the jar because what we're doing with the liquid culture is we're extracting it with this. What we're doing with the agar is we are, I know it's on the, yeah, I mean, you can kind of see it here, you know, on the front of this book, there's a wedge of agar that's been cut out, and you can see the rhizomorphic mycelium that's sprouting out from that. And you can imagine that happening in this jar of seed. You pop the little tiny wedge in there, and like I said, it's already mycelium, and it's already super clean, and it will go, and it'll just explode. So very accelerated growth using agar, and much less risk of contamination because of it.
You're just putting the agar like in the middle of the jar?
Yep, just dropping it in there.
And then that jar will go to your monotub.
Well, he said middle, and you say drop, right? You're talking just drop on top.
Yeah.
And shake it.
Yeah, you can just shake it up or just try to, you know, get it around. The thing is, it's not liquid, so it's a little harder because, you know, it's not gonna disperse like a spore syringe or liquid culture will, but it's okay. It still will be relatively quick in its process.
And your preference between the liquid culture versus agar approach as far as?
Agar is just a little bit more work, you know, so it depends on how lazy I'm feeling, but if I'm just trying to be as safe as
Which one's
possible.
more effective to you?
Agar.
Agar, just because it has such a strong base, okay.
Where do you get the petri dishes?
Amazon, unfortunately.
Where else?
They are plastic though, I'm assuming.
They're plastic, and if you want to upgrade, you can go to glass petri dishes, and I recommend that as well. I have, there's, you know, there's.
Where would you get glass?
Amazon.
Yeah.
You can buy a house on Amazon soon.
Broke college
Sure.
student, if you can afford to go to a more ethical company or something like that, a more reliable source, yeah.
Are you inoculating the petri dishes with the sterile spore syringe or streaking spores off the foil?
Either one will
You
work.
have enough for that, okay.
Either one will work. Or also, for agar, another thing you can do is with your scalpel, you can take the mushroom, and when you pick it, you can cut it in half, so you have these two, like, you know, these two, very good artists, these two halves of your mushroom. And if you're, you know, if you can imagine you're looking at it like this, and you just cut it in half, you're gonna wanna take the scalpel and cut out a tissue, a section of the tissue at the base. So, for instance, if we were to cut this in half, right there is where you'd want to cut out, because it hasn't been exposed to other bacteria, and you can take that little tissue piece and plant it in the agar, and then it will explode. And if you look at the examples that are being passed around, that's what's happened with one of them.
Did you disinfect the petri dishes?
Yep.
Disinfect
You
the
stay, so that's the awesome thing about the pressure cooker, is that you are going to just be throwing all of your supplies in it. And that's, I mean, this one is not as big as other ones that I've had. I've had like 60-quart pressure cookers before, but everything you use, you want to sterilize. So you can just toss it all in there when you're sterilizing your grain, when we get to that. So things like even your spore syringes. But with plastic, you want to be careful, obviously, because it's, you know, high heat, you don't want to melt them. So what you'll do is you'll wrap them in tin foil, and it'll be fine. Or you can switch to glass material if you can. I mean, they make glass spore syringes. They're so cool. I just can't afford them. So yeah, the petri dishes, the scalpel, all the tools that you're going to be using, you might as well just sterilize them while you are spending 12 hours running the thing in your kitchen.
The midsection that you're talking about, making sure it's not exposed to external bacteria. If you are taking that, you want, I assume, some of that to contain a little bit of the spores, or it alone will just?
It alone. It's just the genetic
expand.
material of the tissue culture will be enough.
Simply.
It doesn't have to have mushroom sex because
it's already functioning. All right.
Correct. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, thank you for clarifying it. I just
For
really
bringing up
asked.
the question, yeah. Yeah, so any other questions about agar, liquid culture, spores, syringes?
I'm sorry.
Sure.
So how much of the syringe do you put into like the agar? Like the whole thing, or you're just doing a
Nope,
little
just
bit?
I would say 1 or 2 cc's. There's
Okay.
usually 10 cc's or so.
Really?
Mhm.
One or two.
Yeah,
So
1 or
you
2
get-
cc's.
That's
is all.
enough to inoculate an entire jar.
1 cc is enough to inoculate a whole jar.
And you can get 10 of those filled from
One spore.
one spore print.
It's a very sustainable hobby.
So- Yeah. That does sound so.
So you could throw a couple pieces from the agar into one of your inoculation jars.
Mhm. So you can imagine how rapidly your room is going to explode with supplies, and so be cognizant of that. You know,
Yeah.
it's so funny to me. I've been teaching this class for 4 months, and you can imagine that people that started 4 months ago have had flushes, are producing, are getting into this hobby, and the biggest problem they're having is that they have way too many mushrooms and that they have way too many jars of colonizing, spawns. Just like, it just keeps growing, it doesn't stop. It's a mold, it just keeps it, like, as long as you give it the material, it will keep forming.
Well, my sympathies go up then.
Yeah, seriously, it's like such a hard problem to have.
Yeah.
So what is the timing, like the whole life cycle? How long does it, from beginning to harvest? Like what time frame are we talking about for these typical
About 2 months.
species? 2 months, okay.
So can you take the mycelium from a jar that's already spawned and use that to start another jar?
Yep, that's called the grain-to-grain transfer, and we're gonna get to that.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, that's an easy way to create the problem for yourself. But like I said, I don't think.
I just wondered.
Yeah, no, not a problem.
What do you recommend for incubation temperature?
Incubation temperature, I'm gonna get to that when I just want to stay on track.
That's my question.
Okay, so then, yeah, let's get into that then.
Just details.
Bum, 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 bum. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna start talking about pressure cookers now. We're gonna get into sterilization because that, is gonna come first before incubation. So, this is a pressure cooker. How many people in this room have a pressure cooker already? Oh, sweet, awesome, okay. If you don't have a pressure cooker, Dawson, is it possible to stop the live stream for any moments or maybe mute us? I'm gonna put someone's number that is a pressure cooker dealer in Portland if you need one. Yeah, not that he probably wouldn't be cool shipping around the world, but actually probably wouldn't be.
They're not illegal.
They're legal. Yeah. We have not criminalized pressure cookers.
So on that
Pressure cooker
Yes.
society.
The best thing.
On that front of pressure cookers, there's the Instapot, which is essentially a pressure cooker simplified for very.
Yes. So I will.
Could that be used
cage inside. Thanks, Jim. But, you know, if you're not getting from Jim, we like to have environments. I think a helpful metaphor that I've come up with recently is imagine a, you know, so I mean, you think about the strands of mycelium that come off. These are called rhizomorphic mycelium strands. And they are branching out through the environment to look for nutrients to break down, to, you know, to soak up into the host so that they could grow, right? They're like scavengers looking for these things, and we're about to give them a whole environment. But the reason that seeds and berries are convenient is because they create this this structure, this scaffold that the strands can weave in and out of. So I like to say, think of like a giant boa constrictor in a ball pit. You know, if you could think about like them like moving throughout it, you know, or maybe smaller than a boa constrictor, you know, like weaving inside. Yeah, yeah, a garter snake. Yeah, a bunch of them. Okay, yeah, a bunch of garden snakes. That's a better way to put this this analogy. So, you can use popcorn kernels. You can use rye grain. You can use wild bird seed. You can use quinoa. There's a million things that you can use. And when I say that, I really mean it. People get so weird with colonization. They've soaked and sterilized books and then colonized them. There's a hilarious picture of psilocybin species growing on a Bible that you can find online. People have, you know, colonized sofas. I mean, it's very broad, the range of things that you could use.
At this point, so we're talking step 3, the colonization process, right?
No, we are still talking inoculation.
Yeah.
So
We are, okay.
there's
all right.
sterilization in
You were
here.
talking about the colonization, so it should be,
Yeah, so we're
Okay,
making these to inoculate.
okay.
Yeah.
So that's not providing any nutrients, that merely is just a structure around which
No,
we can
this is
provide.
providing
Okay.
nutrients. Things this because it's rye grain, but say popcorn kernels, a lot less nutrients that it's providing. Because like the ingredients have different purposes to use. I always use rye grain. It is also the most expensive one to use. You can get a 60-pound bag for like $30. Kind of sounds like a good deal, except when you compare it to like millet, which you can get for like $5.
You can also buy it in bulk. You don't have to buy 30 pounds at Bob's Red Mill. And it's not that expensive. So
Yeah.
you don't have to invest at first in a 30-pound bag.
Very good point.
So,
I'm so glad they bought that.
so yeah, so you to get the grain prepared, you have to soak it first. So however much grain you're going to be using, however many jars you want to fill, that's going to depend on how much grain you're going to use. So you take that grain, you put it in a bowl, you fill it up with water. It doesn't have to be sterile water because we're going to pressure cook it. And you're going to want to make sure the water is about 1 inch above the grain, and you're going to let it soak overnight.
And it doubles in size.
Yeah.
I found out
Yeah.
the hard way.
It will soak up the water and grow in size as well. So make sure you're leaving some room for that in the bowl.
So soak the grain in water, in sterilized water.
No.
Does
Not
not
sterilized. anything.
Because we're gonna pressure cook it, it doesn't really matter.
That's happening after, all right.
So,
Conceptual.
the next morning, you wake up, you got soaked grain, you're gonna wake up and strain all of the seeds, or popcorn kernels, birdseed, whatever you used, and then you're going to take that, you're gonna put it in your jars. This is a very good amount, you know, just like maybe leave like a half inch till the top. Now I'm gonna talk about the lids. So, lots of different ways to make these lids. These are a little bit pricier. I'm gonna pass these two around so you can check them out. Actually, if I could pass that one to this one.
What is it called?
So these are called airport lids because there is an injection port and then there's a hole for air to be filtered through, because mushrooms, mycelium, they are not, you know, they don't use photosynthesis. They take in carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. So we do need to give them a little bit of air.
Let's look on the underside, or is this?
Yeah, sure, you can open it up. So, that being said, we need to provide those spaces for them to be able to breathe and to get the fresh air, and also to be able to inoculate through. So, these lids were purchased online in bulk. They're not super expensive, but they are a little pricey, especially compared to making them by yourself. So, to make your own lids, all you will need is a hole puncher, some polyfill, and I don't have it, but some gasket sealer from Ace Hardware. So what you'll do is, you'll take your lid, can I see that one actually? Because this one has this, oh wait.
I suppose so.
No.
I'll allow it.
I don't actually need it, thank
Okay, well, I reject that then.
you. So we have our lid here. And so what we're gonna do is, we're gonna take our hole puncher, we're gonna hole punch two holes. So, with these two holes, we are going to make the air filter, and we are going to make the injection port. And you can see that on the jars as they're passed around. There is a little silicone injection port. It's self-healing, so when you stick the syringe in and you take it out, it doesn't leave a huge gaping hole for bacteria to enter. And so you'll roll up your polyfill and you'll just pull it through, and it'll look like that. Polyfill, it's just a pillow stuffing. You can get it for $1 a bag at Fred Meyer's. Or Joann's, yeah.
That's just batting, right? Otherwise known as batting.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, and then you'll take your gasket sealant and you will just put a good little sized blob on the other hole. And you know, you want to try to be neat with it so that it can, you know, be easily injected into, but that will solidify and dry out, and then you'll be able to pop the syringe needle through that. So now we have our little jar lids, and now they need to be sterilized. So now we will take, we have our jars full of soaked, hydrated grain, okay? And we have the lids that are made with the polyfill and with the injection port, and they're dried and they're ready to go. We will take some, where's it at? Tinfoil, and you will cover the lid of the jar.
It's going that way.
And so this is just so that when you're pressure cooking, it'll help prevent moisture buildup on the polyfill air filter. Yeah, and it'll also help when you take it out, just prevent any bacteria that's in your kitchen or your safe space to fall on top of it. So it'll just keep it nice.
So also do that if you buy the lid with, okay.
This is just a good idea.
So does the polyfill, even with the, with the foil, does that allow the air or the pressure inside the jar to come out so it doesn't explode?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so the top is really screwed on tight.
Not insanely tight. It just has to be like tight enough, you know. Just yeah.
The injection port, what was it? Was that a tape? Did you put over the injection port?
No.
I totally missed that.
So the injection port doesn't need anything else on it. This is fine. This is good to go.
What is that?
This, so this is gasket sealant. Well, this is a pre-made one. But if you wanted to make it at home, a squirt of gasket sealant will dry out and
Yeah.
be ready to use.
But those you can buy, the self-heating.
So you got, who knows, 5 or 6 of these, and they're ready to go. They're soaked. And so we will be placing those inside our jar. We will be placing other. Okay. This is a syringe that, or this is a syringe. Was a syringe that I would want to use later. I'm going to wrap that up in tinfoil. I'm going to pop that in there. I'm going to take my scalpels, other tools that I'm going to use. I'm going to wrap those in tinfoil. I'm going to put them in there, and they're going to get sterilized throughout this whole process, so I can, you know, just be happy with feeling confident that everything's clean. Petri dishes, anything else you can think of that you want to throw in, you can do so. Scissors, I mean, it doesn't matter as long as it doesn't melt. And then we are going to fill the pressure cooker up with 1 inch of water.
Chickens.
Yep. And if you want to measure that, I mean, just look at, oh, sorry, 1 inch above the bottom of the jar, so that much. Because remember, you're going to have your little foundation, your little cage, and your lids. So you want to put the jars on there and have the water get up to 1 inch above it. And then we will lock it up. We will put it on the stove, and we will cook it for about an hour is how long we will put it. We'll get it up to 15, so let me restart. You're gonna put it on your stove, and then you're gonna put it on low. The pressure is going to rise up to 15 PSI, and then you're gonna turn your stove off, and then you're going to let it sit at 15 PSI for an hour, and then you are going to, I mean, the stove is already off, so then you can just leave it on your stove, and it will continue to cool down. And
you only need the 15 minutes of the 15 PSI to achieve that. The rest of it's just cool down.
60 minutes of
you
15
want
PSI.
Full 60 minutes.
At 15. 60 to 90 minutes is what people suggest.
What's autoclave temps? And
Not
pressures? Okay.
But not with the stove on, so you're not making, won't that PSI start to drop as soon as you turn the stove off? I mean, that, when I pressure canned items, the pressure canner, the stove is on the entire time, but you're saying,
So-
when it hits 15 PSI, turn the stove off and let it sit for an hour.
No.
No, it'll cool.
Sorry, and if that's what I
Yeah.
said, sorry, let me correct myself. We're getting it to 15 PSI, leaving the stove on for an hour, and then we're turning it off and allowing it to cool down.
Okay.
Yes. So you're gonna wanna do this in
It's
the,
on low the whole time.
yeah. You won't need to, you know, you shouldn't try to get it, you know, as hot as possible, as quickly as possible. Let it slowly go up from cooking it on low. Also, you're gonna wanna do this at night, you know, or in the evening, because it's gonna have to sit. So if you can coordinate with your schedule to do this at night, and then after an hour of 15 PSI, and you turn everything off and you let it cool down, in the morning you come back, it will be cool, room temperature. But if you don't have time to take them out and incubate them that day, the next day, just leave them in this container until you do have time, because it's this perfect sterile container, and you don't want to take your jars out and put them in the fridge to incubate or to inoculate next week. Like, just leave them in here. They're good to go. It's sealed. It's a perfect little environment.
So how long could you leave them in there if you needed to?
I mean, try not to push it past a week. I don't have an exact estimate for that.
So like, okay.
Yeah,
I
but
don't think it maintains the seal. Part of the seal is formed, I believe, based on the pressure itself.
That's correct.
So, yeah.
but it's definitely safer
But
than
it's
say
much,
taking
yeah,
them.
much safer to
Yes.
leave in there, but it's not like it's indefinitely a closed environment.
Yes, correct.
So you put the jar, or however many jars you're inoculating, I guess, into the pressure cooker, right?
Right.
And then you put the syringe and scalpel, whatever else, are those going in the water also? Because you said the water goes with.
If you can balance them on top of the jars, that'd be optimal.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be best if they didn't go down. I also did want to say, since I did notice some people left, there is a basket here for the donations. If you do have to dip before the end of the class and you do plan on donating, I just wanted to point that out. And thank you.
And for the rest of the world that doesn't carry cash, is
Oh,
there a method
we have a PayPal account that I can put up.
that'd be worth it?
Yeah, towards the end. And then, yeah, there's a donate button on the YouTube for you people watching.
Email address for the PayPal account for donations. bps.donate.
There you go.
Thanks, Casey.
bps.donate@gmail.com is our PayPal that you can send us monies. Thank you. So, moving on. It's the next morning. We woke up, we did our yoga, we drank water, and now we're ready to inoculate. So we're popping this thing open. And remember, we took a shower. I'm going to put my hair up in a bun. Yeah, my boss would be wearing a Tyvek suit. You don't have to. Remember, before we open it up, we're going to take our spray. Everything, and then, yeah, we're going to get this guy out again.
Assuming your gloves are not joined indefinitely into position, you're also going to put on your gloves and spray them as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, rubbing your gloves and making sure that they're sterile. And then there's a bunch of different ways to do this, but so we're going to put our gloves on. And this is the final step to inoculation. So, popping this open. And remember, working very quickly, not like, oh, hello? Oh yeah, no, I'm not busy. No, I'm not doing anything. No, don't do that. Boom, everything you need into here, and then taking your lid, popping it back on. Everything you'll need is your sterilized jars, your syringes, or agar wedges, or, like Nancy said, this one's super gross, but they all are, so. Colonized grain that you already have shaken up, because this, is like a rock inside. And so rubber mallets, or, at our old lab, we used to just have a bike tire that was screwed down to the floor, and you just tap it on a few times, and it'll all shake up. Make sure all that's in there. And then you are going to, like you said, if it's not connected already, and remember, you wiped everything down with rubbing alcohol or sprayed inside this as well. And then you rub your hands. You come inside, and you will uncap your syringe. And I'll do this, just envision that this is all happening. I'm going to do it outside for the people that can't see. You'll take the tin foil off of your jar, and then in the injection port, you will put the syringe in with either your spores or your liquid culture, and you will do a half cc. If you can manage to get it against the glass, do it. Because it is a little hard to do, and it will probably only work like to the sides that the injection port's close to. But you're gonna wanna try to get it on 4 sides and as closest to the glass as you can, so that you can easily monitor it for the coming weeks, so that you can observe the mycelium and make sure that it's healthy, and then it's good to go. So, we did that. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, half cc. So we just used 2 cc's per jar. You can use more, and if you do, it will colonize a little bit faster, but it's up to you. Half cc is all you need per side, so 2 cc's per jar. And then you'll do that to all your jars, and then you will, and for grain-to-grain transfer, imagine that you have a jar and it's fully colonized with healthy mycelium that you've observed, and you've shooken it up. And when you shake it up, just note that all of the fuzz will break up, and it'll look like this again. Just know the mycelium's there. It's just, kind of, yeah, like attached to all the seeds. And then you'll take this and you'll open it up inside of here, and you will literally just take 1/10 of this jar, and you'll be pouring that into other jars and then shaking up the other jars. And now you'll
That's
have my,
just for that method, right? Like,
yeah, that's just another
Separate
method.
method,
You don't
okay.
have to do that, but
What's that term you said?
grain to grain transfer.
Grain to grain transfer.
And that's a super easy way to turn 10 jars into 100 if you wanted to.
Is when once you have one that you could, at that point, it's ready to be mixed in and go to that step. Instead, you could then do a grain to grain transfer
That is
with it.
correct.
That's really what we're talking about. Okay.
So is that where the things get introduced because you're actually opening the jar?
Yes, and that's why we're in a still air box right now. And if you have a flow hood somehow, you're in front of a flow hood doing all of this.
With the agar, do you need what was the kind of lid with the vent for that
Yep,
part?
you're still gonna need that, but you're just gonna, like the grain to grain transfer, you're gonna take the lid off, you're gonna take your wedge of the agar that you cut out, and you're gonna pop that in, you're gonna close it, and you're gonna leave it alone. So, inoculation, boom, done. Any other questions about inoculation? Yes.
but just, if you're trying to, shoot it down the edges of the mason jar,
Mhm.
wouldn't you wanna put injection ports in 4, I would say corners, but it's a circle?
You
On
could.
4 spots with just the air release to the middle?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good idea. But like I said, it's not entirely necessary that they have to be around all 4 sides. It's just a better way to get it to colonize a little more evenly and quicker. But you could literally put it in the middle, squirt 2 cc's and then leave it. I mean, it's like, we're just trying to make, little easier ways to do these things. And that could be a little easier if you wanted to take the extra steps to do that, you totally could. Other questions about inoculation? Yes.
When and how often do you want to shake the jars?
So, I'll cover that in incubation.
On the, did somebody, on the making of your own lids, if you're not using the self-healing ports, are you every time replacing those
Nope, you
2
can keep
holes?
sterilizing.
Okay, but aren't you, by poking through, you have another hole through which
They're
you
self-healing.
But if you're not using the self-healing, like if you're doing, we didn't mention
The
another.
gasket seal.
The gasket sealant is also self-healing.
Is it? Okay.
That's why we're using that,
Alright,
yeah, because
alright,
it's
it
a
is.
weird material just like that.
It is, okay.
It's silicone that will just heal by itself,
Okay.
and you can keep using it.
And is there a limit to that? Like, is in the hospital, when you're taking things out of the bottle, you're only supposed to use it a certain number of times.
They probably will get
Max.
a little old and then maybe start deteriorating and start falling apart. It hasn't
You haven't
happened to
experienced that?
mine yet, and I've used them 3 or 4 times.
Okay, 3 or 4? I thought you would have used it.
Well,
Many,
this
many more times.
last batch of
Yeah.
jars that I've created, and these, I mean, I have the pre-made ones that last forever,
Yeah.
but just experimenting with making my own lids, they've done fine.
Good enough, thank you.
Do you need to use that size jar?
Nope, you can use little tiny ones, you can use gigantic ones. Little tiny ones will colonize faster, but they will also take longer to colonize the actual monotub, and, you could, equate that to the other sizes as well. So I'm gonna move on from inoculation. Finally, okay, cool. Okay, incubation, we're gonna get through this one pretty quickly as well, because this one's fairly simple. We have these jars that have just been inoculated with our spores, and we are going to place them. You can do it in a tub, or you can just put them in a safe little spot in a cardboard box in your closet. But the numbers for incubation are, you want them to maintain 80 to 85 degrees is optimal, but it can be 70, so I should put 70 to 85 degrees. I'm gonna take these tables off.
Make sure you spray them.
Yeah. Just know that 80 to 85 is optimal, and that if you're at 70, it's gonna take a while to colonize.
I have heard that you could also set your jars on like a heating pad.
So you shouldn't set your jars directly on the heating pad, because what can happen is you could, I mean, depending on how hot you have it, but even a little bit might be too much, you could start to cook them, and the hotter they are, the more prone they are to the bacteria inside. They'll start to form, and I've known that can contaminate them, can cause contamination.
Do they need to stay in the dark?
Yes. So that's why they're in a cardboard box. You know, you put the blanket on them. It's not a huge deal. People are always worried. It's like, if I check on them, am I going to ruin them? No, you can check on them multiple times. You know, a week. I generally do it every 3 days or so. This is your first time. You're probably going to do it more often because you're just so excited and you just want to see it. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks to see anything, and then you'll see the high phase starting, and then it will start to colonize and it'll start to explode in the cool little circular motion if you got it to the outside of the glass, and then that will take it all up. What gentleman in the back asked was, when do you shake it? So when you take your jar and you're going to use the bicycle tire or the rubber mallet, and you're going to break up all the mycelium that formed. So basically you can think of it kind of like a pre-workout, you know, like we made sure it was clean and that it's strong, and now we're going to shake it up to turn it back into this so that it could fully form one more time, and we can be just completely confident that it will be strong enough to colonize our whole monotub. So that's at 50 to 60%. And so, yeah.
Recommendation to keep it at 80 to 85? I mean, how you would do that?
So, yes, so the heating pad thing, you can take the heating pad and tape it to the top of the lid and then put that in it, as long as it's not making contact with the jars. You know, so like people always put it on the bottom and then they put the jars on top of it. It's not a great idea because it's going to cook the bottom of them and you're going to get a bunch of mold on the bottom of your jars.
So heating pad on for 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Another method that's a little bit more advanced, I've done it in the past, and it's pretty genius. You take 2 tubs and you put them on top of one another, a little, I guess, bigger tub on top so that it doesn't, so you have space at the bottom, but you fill it up with water, sterilized water, and then you put an aquarium heater inside of it. And so it heats the water up, and it doesn't use a whole lot of energy, but if the water is maintained at, you know, say 70 or 80 degrees, you know, then it will keep the whole temperature. It's not directly contacting anything, and it also maintains humidity inside of the little room.
I was wondering that about slow cooker. Do you suppose the warm setting on that would put that around? I mean, I guess you could just simply measure the water. But do you suppose the warm setting on that, if you had the bottles elevated inside of water in that and just let that would that accomplish the same thing? Even on the warm. Well, there's warm and there's low and then there's high. Do you think warm's probably
you're gonna cook all your mycelium. It's not gonna work. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, you know what I mean. Like the top floor of your house, you know, is probably maintained
like
around.
a sous vide.
What?
A sous vide.
What's that?
It's like a cooking technique, but it really, you can basically just change the setting of like how hot you have the water. And so the idea is to cook things at a really low temperature for like a really long time. And that's how you get like tender like steaks and things like that. But it's a device that you can put into like some kind of container that's filled with water.
Oh.
And it will regulate it at whatever temperature.
How do you spell it?
So it's French. So it's S-O-U-S.
Space V-I-D-E.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's probably gonna get too hot because it's.
And you have to leave it for like a month.
Yeah, I don't know how long you can leave that device in for.
Take out the middle.
Same
No,
like
no,
the
no. We got the
aquarium
first
heater.
4 right.
Yeah.
Right?
And then
It's gonna be on
Yeah,
for
VID.
weeks.
But yeah, you have a.
But I guess that was designed
Yeah.
for water.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just the best way to go.
Yeah. If you're in a slow cooker.
Yeah, it's 2 words, but yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna keep moving on. I've just realized it's 6:15, which means we have 45 minutes for me to explain all the rest of how to grow mushrooms. So I'm gonna start to get a little bit quicker with this, and yeah. So who's bearing with me here? So incubation. It's been 3 to 5 weeks. You've checked your jars every 3 days. I'm going to pass around these 2 jars that are gross, and you can check out some forms of the mold. There is trichodermia in this jar and trichodermia and lipstick mold in these. So I'll pass the trich this way, And
Scared now.
that one this way. So, pretty simple. Lipstick mold is called it because it turns this red color. Trichoderma is how it's pronounced actually, is the most common mold next to green-blue mold, which you can imagine is called that because it looks blue and green. And if you see those, if you see contamination in any of your jars, grab it, don't open it, take it outside. Some people put it in their yard and hope for the best, but you could also just throw the jar away. Really unsustainable and sad, but if you want...
Sterilize the jar.
Huh?
What if you re-sterilize the jar?
You can do that. So if you just pour it outside and then you re-sterilize the jar, you're good to go. But some people are just so sketched out, they're just like...
Bringing that, and even if you dumped it outside, you're just bringing that now back
Correct.
in next to your other.
Yeah, so it's just real sketchy. So you just want to be very careful about that. So keep an eye out for contamination, and if you see contamination, know that you're not going to save it. And hopefully it doesn't happen to all of your jars. It's going to happen to one or two of them, and that's just the fact. Please do not give up on the hobby or the process if you experience a little bit of contamination. I cannot tell you how many jars, how many monotubs I've lost to contamination. And expert mycologists deal with it all the time. It happens at our actual mushroom company all the time. And it's just a way of the cultivation. It's just part of it. Like I said, that's why we use sterile techniques. That's why we try to mitigate risk wherever we can, because you don't want it, but do not be discouraged and don't quit because of contamination. Please keep trying. So,
So how does that look in contrast to the healthy mycelium?
the healthy mycelium is just purely white and fuzzy.
Okay.
Any type of discoloration is bad news.
It's that without the green.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so we're gonna keep going. So incubation. Over. So the colonization period. First, what we'll need to do is we will need to prepare and pasteurize our substrate. So we are going to be using cocoa core or coconut fiber. I bought this at Naomi's Farm Supply on Highway 26 in Southeast Portland. You can get a huge bag this size. I think this was like 10 or 15 bucks. Sweet deal. And then vermiculite from Fred Meyer's. Coarse grade, you don't want the huge chunky balls of vermiculite that some people use in gardening. You want it to be kind of powdery like this is. So I'm just gonna make a small batch to show everyone now. But the recipe for your substrate should be 50% cocoa core and 50% verm or vermiculite. There's a million and one ways to alter this recipe. Same as everything else that, you know, any mycologist or mushroom cultivator will use in their practice. You can add no cocoa core and then instead replace it with 50% horse manure. Something to be cognizant of is that we need nutrients in this substrate. The mushrooms need to be able to create and colonize the substrate, and then once they do it, you know, completely, then they will run out of it and they will produce our fruits for us. But they need something. Cocoa core and verm don't give them barely anything. So while this is a recipe that works, it's not the best recipe. So some things that I would add and that you should do your own experimentation with is horse manure, coffee grounds, gypsum, worm poop. Those are the more like the famous four that most people use, and they can be added, you know, into this mixture like 25%. You know, so if you maybe Just condensed these down to like 35 to 40% each, and then added 25% horse manure or 5% coffee grounds, or you mixed all of these together. It really depends. Different strains of mushrooms like different amounts of these things. So golden teachers, for instance, really like poop. Psilocybe cubensis loves poop. So horse manure, worm poop, chicken poop. Yeah, chicken poop works.
It doesn't matter if it's a hot versus not, because so different types, so like rabbit poop is not, I believe, not hot, chicken is going to be considered hot, like you can't, for planting, you can't, some of those you can put directly to plants.
High nitrogen.
Yeah, I'm sure the nitrogen levels and those types of things differ. Rabbit poop, I'm not sure.
But those issues with horse manure, chicken, or anything like that, you're not.
They're good.
And the introduction of spoiling bacteria by,
So we're about
the
to-
use of horse manure or these others.
They're all about to be pasteurized.
You're also gonna,
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this recipe and we are going to mix it into a big bowl. And what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna use a pillowcase as a filter to the substrate. So we're gonna take the pillowcase and we are going to line our bowl with said pillowcase. And like I said, I'm just gonna do an example. So 50% coca coir, 50% verm. I'm gonna do 2 cups of these. This is 2 cups each, so I'm gonna do 4 cups of coca coir, 4 cups of verm.
ooh. Oh, party foul.
One,
Russian party foul, I suppose.
2. Next, we are going to take a spoon. We are going to mix this all up. Use my hands. And there's, at least in this supply from Naomi's, the cocoa coir is a little clumpy, so you want to make sure that it's there's no huge clumps, that it's generally fine, and then you're going to have this mixture that looks like this. So then we are going to, I like to use a kitty litter box just because it's a little easier. We are going to take our pillowcase, and you're generally going to use, just so you know, way more than what I just did. This is just to show everyone. And then we are going to take boiling water, and we are going to pour the boiling water in the substrate. So
How much boiling water?
this, it does not matter how much water, you just want to make sure that it's covered, because we are going to hang the pillowcase up to dry.
So you don't have to cook it, you just pour boiling water over it?
Correct. So I've poured boiling water over our substrate now.
So is that intentionally set up that it's elevated and that water simply poured through, or is it sitting in the water?
It's the mixture right now. I think I poured a little bit too much.
Is the intention for it to sit in the water though, to have a longer duration of time?
No.
You just need to.
Well, yeah, you definitely want the water to come up, and you want it to be submerged in water, because what we're going to do now.
So you are going for submersion.
Yeah, you're going to take a plate or something, and you're going to cover up the bucket. You're going to let it sit in that boiling water for 1 hour.
Okay.
Exact temperatures don't matter, anything like that. The boiling water in the substrate, what it's doing is it's killing bacteria, but only enough. The difference between pasteurization and sterilization with our pressure cooker is we are eliminating all bacteria pretty much with the pressure cooker. Pasteurization, we're still leaving some of the good stuff. So if you're using horse manure, there's a lot of amazing nutrients and minerals and aminos in horse manure that the mushrooms are going to use to grow and absorb. And we don't want to kill those. So that's why we pasteurize with the boiling water for 1 hour instead of pressure cooking it. So Now we've got this. I'm gonna put gloves on for this part. Any other questions about the recipe, about this process?
Did you say it's boiled distilled water or boiled regular water?
Boiled distilled. Yeah.
And how
Why?
much of each ingredient were you putting in? How much of the pepper cord and how much to make it like?
50-50%.
Yeah, but in what amount?
So it depends on how big your tub is.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can measure, you know, for a tub this size, probably, I'd say maybe 10 cups of each.
Okay.
How thick on the bottom?
About 2 inches.
Okay.
Enough to make 2 inches. And it's like if you have leftover, always make a little extra rather than, you know, trying to conserve because it's super cheap materials. So we have this, it's been an hour, yeah.
You wait an hour. You
I
put in
waited an
a,
hour and it's been boiling in there. And so now, so for instance, what I do is I have a pull-up bar in my kitchen. So now what I do is I take it, I tie it around the pull-up bar and I just let it sit. This provides a decent enough filter for other bacterias. So as it's sitting there, it's drying. Even better if you can put it in your bathroom, just on the shower curtain, you know, because your bathroom's probably a little bit cleaner than say my kitchen. And this will dry overnight. And the nice thing is hang drying, it will get it to the proper moisture content, or what we call in mushroom cultivation, field capacity, which means we're trying to mimic the exact moisture that can be found in, you know, the wild with these mushrooms. I'm gonna.
Did you say hang dry just overnight?
Yeah.
How long? Okay. Yeah.
And it will just get to the right temperature. So, just to be sure, a way to measure field capacity, a way to measure the perfect moisture content is once you've got it, take some of your substrate in your hand and just a little bit, and if you squeeze it a little bit, you should get some drops. And if you squeeze it very hard, you should get like a little, like a steady stream. So honestly, that wasn't too much. So this could even use more water. Squeeze very hard. Oh, that's fine. Yeah. But you, like, if you're simply holding it and it's dripping, it's way too wet. You need to hang it for longer. It needs to dry out more. And
So why not take the approach of after you've done the hour pasteurization, the quick version that you showed us, you wrung it out.
Mhm.
Why not take that approach? Why not simply, if you're in a hurry, can you just simply wring it out and then
totally
get
do
it
that.
to that appropriate amount?
Yep, you can put it on a table and just like lean on it and just
Okay.
or like put it in your sink.
There's no
and
reason
do
not
that.
to do that.
That's true.
Because you'll be introducing the inoculum, I don't know if you can call it that. That's
Well,
strong enough.
so another thing is though, and that this is why, is that if you do that, it's still boiling, it's still super hot. You're messing with steamy substrate. So what we're also doing is cooling it down overnight.
Yeah.
To get it to room temperature, because it's going to take a couple hours to do that anyways.
Yeah, but you could still expedite it to some degree.
You could.
If you wanted to take that approach.
That's very true. You could do that. You could cool it down in different ways, and you could just squeeze out the moisture to get field capacity. That's totally possible. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to prepare our monotub now. So this is a separate container that we have now. Something I've been doing lately is spray painting the bottoms, because what I'm about to do is we are going to take a black trash bag and we are going to lay it down in the bottom of our tub. And we want it to be about, like I said before, 2 to 3 inches around the bottom. And this is because, like I said, mushrooms, they don't photosynthesize, but they still do grow towards light. They fruit towards light just because they know that if there's light shining, they know that they're, fruiting the right way, and that's where they're going to send their spores. But plastic bags every single time stacks up. It's a waste of plastic, so it's not sustainable. So what you could do is you could just put duct tape around, measure 2 to 3 inches right here, duct tape around it, and use black spray paint, spray cold tubs. That's what mine look like at home. I just haven't done it to this one yet. Yeah, and so you'll tape this black trash bag to the sides to save time. I'm not going to do that. And then you're going to take your pasteurized substrate, and what you're going to do is you are going to make mushroom mycelium substrate lasagna right now. So you're going to take and put a layer of your substrate down. You're going to compact the first one, and then you're going to take your myceliated grain, and you're going to imagine that this is completely white, it's healthy, it's ready to go, and you're going to take that, open it up after shaking it, and then you're going to add a layer of that on top of the substrate. And then you are going to take substrate. You are going to add another layer. And you are going to do this till you're out of substrate and you're out of your grain. Whichever one comes first, that's kind of just where you have to stop.
Do you want one or the other on, so last thing on top?
Yeah, the substrate
Substrate?
is where you should end. But it really doesn't matter. Some people just mix it in one giant layer and that's it. And that's fine too. They both work. If there's exposed myceliated grain, it's totally fine. The goal is to make sure the whole thing's myceliated, so it's going to happen sooner or later.
How many jars of grain would you expect to use? Something that size?
You can use one per tub. It's totally fine. Yeah. Also, to make this monotub, yes, we are going to take a hole saw is usually easiest, but if you have other ways, that totally works. If you're using a hole saw or you're using a drill, make sure you have a piece of wood behind it so that you're not cracking your plastic tub. You want 6 holes around. And then to cover those holes, you're going to use micropore tape. So that's just, I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with micropore tape, sports bandage tape. It's tape that allows air to be filtered in without bacteria coming in. So you're going to use that around each hole of the tub. And yeah, so then now we have this monotub, and it's currently colonizing with our substrate that we've pasteurized and our grain or spawn that we've colonized through the past 5 weeks or so. And so now we're going to put this in our safe little room, and we're going to make sure that it's maintained at 70 to 80 degrees. 85 is going to be a little too hot at this point. So 70 to 80 degrees, and with a humidity of always more than 90%. And so you can get, I don't know where the heck mine went, but you go to Fred Meyer's, you get a little tiny temperature and humidity gauge. You can just sterilize it with rubbing alcohol and then pop it in there and just leave it so that you can easily monitor. You don't have to open it up.
I don't know if you said anything about this, but what size holes?
1 to 2 inches.
You sterilize the box, right? Before
Yep.
you put everything in.
Just wiping everything with rubbing alcohol.
And then the tape, micropore tape, or whatever you call it?
Yep.
Where do you access that?
Fred Meyer's. Yeah. Walgreens, Rite Aid.
That's a good question.
It's like batting, also they sell that kind of stuff. It's
90%.
sports stores, I think,
Yeah.
as well, for like covering your bat handles.
Just so that the skin can breathe, it's like
Yeah.
you use it all the time, but yeah.
So how do you maintain 90?
So that's the next part. Yeah. So if it starts to get a little too hot and your substrate's drying out, you take a spray bottle with distilled and sterilized water, and this is such a scary part because we're so close to the end. We're almost to the fruit, but just imagine what's happening when you open up the box and you go to spray in water and then you close it. Just all this, air is going inside. So it's extremely important that if it is below 90% humidity and you have to spray it, and you're going to have to, it's not going to maintain itself at 90% humidity. You are taking the disinfectant spray and spraying all over the room before you open that up. You want to attack the bacteria in the air and just stick it to wherever it is and disinfect.
Have you taken the approach ever of just having another small hole toward the top for putting that in without actually opening the the lid itself, so you could just sterilize the tip of that spray.
You would have to plug it with something or else, because you don't
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
You could.
With the tape?
Yeah. Or yeah, you could just like have tape that you remove every single time. You could do that too. I just like, yeah, you could definitely manage that. And there's a lot of ways. This is the most low-tech method, is to open it up and bam, bam, bam. I've also seen people place a little cup of sterilized water inside of it and use an aquarium like air bubbler, and they put that inside they use the hose, and they take the hose in, and then they put that inside the cup of sterilized water, and then that bubbles the sterilized water and keeps it humid inside the container. And that's not even that expensive. You know, so I've used that method before, and it's a lot easier, that's for sure.
But it has to be sprayed in, you can't just shoot water into the substrate itself, like take a syringe.
Spray
and shoot
the
it down.
sides of the tubs.
Okay.
You don't want to spray directly on the substrate.
So you could use an injection port, and squirt water in with a bigger syringe?
I would recommend the spray bottle.
Yeah.
But you could with the syringe, and just be, you could do it. So that is colonization. So we're going to keep that in our warm environment. We're going to keep it above 90% humidity, and we're going to wait about 2 weeks.
Is there a max humidity? If you're, that's gonna be an issue.
If it's condensing or something?
Yeah. Because I imagine if it's just a soup of water, like you needed to start with the appropriate amount on the soil.
Yeah. Yeah, 98 or 99% is probably the most you should go.
But you're not really running into that. That's the problem.
Not usually. I hadn't had much experience, but I want to hold these up. Because these are good examples of what you're going to start seeing. So we've got the substrate here, and we have the little seeds, you know, which is what we layered it in, and you can see that each seed is exploding with this white mycelium in the back. And so your whole layer of mushroom lasagna is going to look like this slowly until it looks like this. And when it looks like this, it's going to be this huge brick. You are going to, inspect and make sure that it's all white. There's no blue, there's no red, there's no green all over your mycelium. And then you are going to put it into fruiting conditions, which means you are going to introduce a lot more air, and you are going to introduce light. Natural, indirect sunlight. So if you could put it somewhere in your house where it's like, you know, against one wall of a room, there isn't sunlight hitting it from the window, but it's like, you know, far enough away that it's still getting the light, but not getting hit. Then you're going to take your lid, and you're just going to put it on upside down. And that's going to allow enough air to flow in through the cracks. And since it's colonized fully and we're ready to go, you don't have to be too worried about contamination at this period. It made it. Congratulations, you're done. You're so close. The next thing you're going to start seeing are those little pins that I talked about. So now I'm going to redraw that diagram because we're going to talk about how to pick your fruit. So you got this huge tub, and you're getting all these little tiny pin boys everywhere, pin people, and they're turning into these young mushrooms, and it's just going to be everywhere, all over the tray. Hopefully it will. So, and like I said, some of them are going to grow a lot faster than the other ones are. And when you see that the veil breaks and that the cap starts to expand, you want to go in, and the way you want to pick them is you want to grab the base of them, apply a little bit of pressure, and just wiggle a little bit. They're not like screwed into the substrate, you know, they're very loosely attached to the mycelium structure. So it doesn't take a whole lot to just pop them out. And then what you'll do is you will either, if you're in the proper situation to, you could just eat them right then if you wanted. But what you'll probably do is you'll probably dry them for future use. And you can use a variety of different things to do that. You could use a dehydrator if you have one. You can pop it into your oven on low for, a little bit. I generally just leave them. I have a, little cardboard box, and it has little tiny shelves inside of it. I just put all my mushrooms on there, and I leave it in there for a day or so, and they just naturally dry up.
Do you know what the dehydrator temperature time is?
No, unfortunately not. I would just recommend observing it. Yeah.
So you can just basically lay them out and just wait for them to
Mhm.
dry.
Yep, you could. Yeah, they'll dry on their own if you just set them out. You can just set them in your fridge and they'll dry out. You don't have to worry about them getting contaminated now. I mean, they could get moldy, I guess, at this point, but it's not likely. And so, sorry.
To answer that, food preservation has a lot to do with just the moisture content, which you can kind of feel. You just feel for it. Like if it's really flexible, then you haven't achieved it. But if it shouldn't snap like a stick either, that's over drying. So it's just right around there. We'll have it low enough that that it's going to be preserved.
That's perfect. Yes. Any other questions about? So we're past colonization, and now we are also have covered fruiting, and that's and remember to make your spore prints so that you can keep this going forever. Yes.
Fruiting temperature.
Yeah, I mean, if you could still maintain 70 to 75 outside in the environment, but you're moving it out of your closet or bathroom or whatever because you need the indirect sunlight. And yeah, so if you can maintain 70, 75, that'd be optimal. But if you can't and it's like 65 in your house, which it won't be, in coming months, if we're lucky, then yeah, it should be fine. There was another question?
So I had some grow that had like white fuzzy stuff.
Yes,
Is
so
that okay?
sometimes what you'll see at the base of the stems, you'll get this very fuzzy stuff. They call it fuzzy feet. And what that means is that you need more fresh air. It's not contaminated, it's going to be okay. There is a contaminant called cobweb mold that is like this wispy, it looks like a spider web that is taking over your tray, which is hard to differentiate from mycelium sometimes, but it is noticeably like separate and wispier than the mycelium. And that can be solved with hydrogen peroxide spray. You could just spray your whole substrate and, hope that it will come back, but it is most likely poo-poo.
What might be wrong if the pins don't mature and just kind of wither?
Yeah, so I should talk a little bit about flushing. So this will happen for a few days, all these mushrooms, because it happens very quickly at the end. The pins come up and then it's like, woof, 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 they start growing, they could go from this to that in 12 hours. So you'll have this like rapid growth in your tub that will usually end around 3 days. But even then, you'll have a bunch that stalled, or they're little, we call them aborts. But before you do the next flush, and what a flush is you're going to be able to take this cake out of the tub and you can like hold it. It's like a giant Rice Krispie. And so you're going to want to take that and after you've picked everything, including the aborts, you want to make sure that you get the aborts off of it. You can soak that cake in a different, or even just in the same tub. You can pour water in it and soak it for 12 hours overnight and then pour it out. It'll be rehydrated and can produce just as much the second time. And it can have as many as 5 flushes per tub.
Do you add more substrate, or the mycelium is enough for it to?
It's enough.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't have to add any more substrate. You can just keep rehydrating that same thing. It will get nasty as flushes go.
What happens if you don't pick the aborts?
So the aborts are an issue because they are organic matter that are on the substrate, the brick. And so if you soak those, they're going to get just nasty and gross, and they could bring contamination much quicker.
Because it might break down and just become contaminated.
Yes.
You said you soaked it for, sorry. Go ahead.
Go.
You soaked it for 12 hours, you said?
Yeah, just overnight. Yeah, 8 to 12 hours.
So the aborts are normal?
They're normal, totally. They'll pop up. I'm going to go.
So that's after you harvest, like after everything's grown?
Yep.
Really, like you've gotten as much as you can on that yield? and then you still get any doing it.
That's correct.
Okay.
How do you know when that's done? How do you know when it's done?
Because these will stop growing. You know, like I said, and after 3 days, you're not going to be seeing them
Three,
pop up.
so it's about 3-ish days process.
2 to 3, yeah.
2 or 3 days process, and then you're just gonna see that it's just sort of stalled.
Correct.
Okay.
So, is there any potency in the aborts? Like if
Totally.
one were
Do
to,
not discount the pins.
so if one were to theoretically be microdosing,
Yeah, just eat a little baby. Honestly, the little babies might be more than microdoses. They contain a lot of psilocin.
It's not human babies,
At like,
though.
right, not human babies.
no, well, you never know. Whatever. Whatever blows your hair back.
However much psilocybin is in that is also in that mushroom.
Oh.
You know, like so at that stage they have as much psilocybin as they're gonna get. So don't ignore or discredit the aborts. Pick them and eat them.
So do you rehydrate after each flush?
Yes. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'm going to end it. We got 15 minutes left, so I'm going to pass around the basket for those that would like to donate. Like I said, we would really appreciate it. I'm going to put the PayPal is, what was it again, Casey?
You're all good.
Okay. And is there comments on YouTube for people that?
There's been a lot of comments throughout the entire time. It's steadily had like 75 to 100 people, so.
Wow.
And there's a lot of people answering the questions.
Sorry, before I dump all my cash in the basket,
Sure.
how much are you charging for this syringe?
So this was $30 suggested donation, but as much as you can pay, I'm totally fine with it. I would like to do this for free, but it is very time consuming, and I do spend quite a bit of cash on all the supplies. So $30 is what I suggest. We do offer scholarships for people that, well, for low income, it's like if you can't pay, that's totally fine. Just don't, you know. I probably couldn't afford a mushroom workshop right now either, but. Yeah. There's also other scholarships for people that want to come that maybe can't.
And then how much are the syringes?
So I have syringes if you'd like to purchase them. Just come up after I close out in like a second here. I don't have that many. I probably have about 15 left. But these are $10 each if you want to buy a syringe from me, or you can go online to these websites and grab them. Also, I highly suggest picking up a grow bag. If you'd like, these are $10 for a grow bag, and you're gonna get a decent amount of mushrooms off of these. And I maybe suggest starting out with that before you even go and buy any of the supplies or anything else, just to get familiar with the mushroom life cycle. And I've got about, I think 10 of these. And like this one, literally if someone wants to buy this, it's gonna produce mushrooms in 3 or 4 days. And I think I explained it, but all you gotta do is cut the top of the bag, fold it over, cut a slit in the plastic, and mushrooms will just start popping out on your kitchen counter. So, with that being said, if you have any more questions, feel free to come up and ask me. I'm going to put my number on the board. If you have any other questions that you've encountered down the road.
On the YouTube stream?
It's not on there.
Yeah, not on YouTube, and I'm not going to say it out loud. Yeah, that is my phone number if you want to contact me with any questions about the whole process. I'm more than happy to help people out and support you on the path. Like I said, I just want people to be able to experience this awesome hobby. It's something that I'm so obsessed with and that I love so much. And on that note, I also want to just shout out some of the people that have inspired me in the mycology world. Paul Stamets, you probably all know the name, famous Pacific Northwest mycologist, writes a lot of amazing books. One I highly suggest checking out is Mycelium Running, How Mushrooms Can Save the World. Not a whole lot about psilocybin in this book, but just lots of awesome things to learn about mushrooms and the ways they can help the environment. And then also another local author, Peter McCoy, is here in Portland. And this book, Radical Mycology, is amazing. It's pretty huge though. It's kind of hard to jump into right off the bat. But yeah, another amazing person. And then David Aurora wrote this hip pocket guide to foraging. It's called All the Rain Promises and More, and it's an essential book to have if you ever want to pick mushrooms in the wilderness. And it's just hilarious. He's an awesome person. Whoa. And with that being said, thank you everyone so much for coming. And yeah, feel free to connect with each other and hang around and
YouTube off.
you learn a whole
Is that off? Is the YouTube off?
YouTube is off. Okay.